Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Clovis City Council meeting. We appreciate you all taking time to be with us tonight. I will call this meeting to order, and I will ask Mayor Pro Tem Wanatua to please lead us in the flag salute.
Roll, Brian.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Baskel. Here. Councilmember Bessinger.
Here.
Councilmember Wanatua.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
And Mayor Ashbeck.
I am here. Under public comments tonight, we invite anyone in the audience who has an item to bring before the council that is not on our agenda, but that is within our jurisdiction. We would invite you to do that now. We'd ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes or less, so anybody who wants to bring an item, feel free.
There. Hello?
Oh, go ahead.
Hi. You guys might obviously, hopefully remember us. I'm Cheryl Madrano from the Sunnyside incident. Hopefully you guys are meeting today, well, I know you guys are meeting today in closed council about our potential litigation nearing a very close end here. But I had emailed Andy some main bullet points of what we really wanted to accomplish, hopefully to not go to litigation. So one of the main things is to issue a check directly to our builder, preferably. Then the second thing is going to be to pay rent until our home is actually rebuilt. And then that's obviously so we could use the money that we get for our personal property that's lost to actually replace it, like all the beds that have been lost, all of our dressers, all of our couches, everything else, our weight equipment, I mean, you name it, we lost it, obviously. And then we wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that we are so tired of this and we want to be done, obviously, probably a lot more so than you guys, obviously, because, well, we would like to go back to normal sometime soon rather than more than a year and a half, almost a year and a half later. And we wanted to make sure that you guys understood the size difference, because you guys everyone kept saying the size difference in the home. But if you actually looked at the appraisal report and our home that we were proposing to rebuild, it was actually the same number of bedrooms and bathrooms. So I get you guys understand the square footage was different. That's what everyone was concerned about. But if you guys actually had the outbuildings correctly, then it would be clear that it was very similar to the size that was before. Am I missing anything? I think that's everything. But Andy has our email that we sent, so hopefully he can forward that to you guys and you guys can get it. Okay.
Thank you very much. We do have a closed session item on this tonight, so thank you for your comments here tonight. Others?
Hello, my name is Brent Burdine. I'm here to speak about the Vietnam Veterans event coming up next week. The Vietnam War Veterans Day event, hosted by the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 933. The Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 933, and the Clovis Veterans Memorial District are honored to host the Vietnam War Veterans Day event on Wednesday, March 29th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. The Wednesday morning celebration includes a card gathering on 4th Street, a patriotic concert by the AUSA Sounds of Freedom Band, a photo exhibit inside the Rex Phoebus Memorial Building, and more. The purpose of the event is to honor families with a relative on the Vietnam War Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C., widowed spouses of Vietnam War-era veterans, and veterans who served at any time from November 1st, 1955 to May 15th, 1975. Regardless of the location of service, our nation loses nearly 600 Vietnam veterans every day. Many residing in care facilities. Help us honor these brave men and women who served and sacrificed before our opportunity vanishes. There'll be a pinning ceremony for the spouses and surviving children, and we're also going to be serving food. It's going to be held over here at the park where the band will be set up, people come out to eat. Fresno County Veteran Services will be at the building providing a lot of information tables for veterans, for their spouses, and for their children. I also brought flyers and for each of you, so if I can give them to the county clerk.
You bet.
You've all been personally invited. Thank you.
Thank you for your work on the event. Thank you for your service on betting, and we appreciate the invitation very much.
Thank you very much.
You bet. We don't have a gold star on our city logo for nothing. Thank you so much. Others?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Nader Enan. I commonly go by Nathan, and I am here concerning a matter of safety near Freedom Elementary School. I believe there are a number of other individuals here who are also here concerning the same issue, so perhaps it might make the most sense for all those who are going to give a public comment on that to do so maybe directly after me.
Nathan, can I ask you, may I call you
Yes.
Nathan? Nathan and I have had email exchanges about this, so just a question about this. So how many of you are here to comment on this item? Not too, a few. Oh. You don't need to comment, but you're here for this item. Let me say it that way. That might be the right way to say it. So what I would offer is, you have 5 minutes. This is the public comment session, so there is no action. We can't do anything about it. It's not agendized. I think you all are aware of that, but we certainly want to hear what you have to say. So if you want to add to what Nathan says, hop up. If you want to just say ditto, hop up and say that, but we see the show of hands. And then I will just, I'll preempt the city manager if I might, and there will be a special neighborhood meeting to address this more specifically this Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. And I think John can talk a little bit more about that at the end of your comments. So we understand the significance of this and the importance of kind of getting everybody in the room together. I know there was somebody who said, how come we didn't know about this meeting tonight? There's really nothing to know. It's just a public comment. It wasn't on the agenda. You didn't miss a notice. So it's just your time to come and speak to us. So with that, please comment. Everybody's welcome, or just say ditto. And then Wednesday night, we can talk a little bit more with staff and our PD about sort of the current status and where we're, like, what are the steps we can do moving forward. Is that right? City Attorney, John? All right, so Nathan, nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too. And I first want to say I appreciate immensely how quickly you were in contact with me about this matter, and I genuinely appreciate everyone on the council who's concerned about this. We realize that we have your support with this issue. So just want to introduce myself very quickly. I am a husband and a father of 4 children. I have been in Clovis for 19 years. I teach full-time at Clovis College and at Fresno State. I reside near Gettysburg and Locan, and have resided there since 2007. So the whole matter arose when an incident occurred at our home about a week ago, where an individual approached our home around 1 in the morning and knocked on the door and looked through the windows, walked down the street, and then returned back again, looking through the windows and attempting to have us open the door. So we contacted Clovis PD immediately. I myself retrieved a firearm from our home safe where we keep it locked up, and Clovis PD came out very promptly and apprehended the individual. We came to find out that the individual was from a halfway house that is directly behind us and shares a backyard fence with us. We posted this on the nextdoor.com website so that neighbors would be aware of this, and other neighbors brought to our attention that this individual who had come to our door, by identifying them on the ring cam, is a level 6 sex offender who is registered on Megan's Law with the offenses of sexual battery, touching personal intimately against will for sexual arousal, as well as lewd or lascivious acts with a child under 14 years of age. So we were unaware of the fact that a sex offender lived directly behind us. We also came to find out from the police officer that there is up to 10 individuals who occupy that home who are either coming out of having been incarcerated or involved with drug rehabilitation. It's yet to be completely understood all that is happening with that home. In the meantime, it's been about a week and a half, and there has been ongoing tumultuous situation in the neighborhood. We've had parents who are enraged over the situation to find out that this halfway house was established without their knowledge. We've had people speculating whether there's a license, whether it's legal, whether it was permitted in the first place. No neighbor was notified whatsoever that this was going to be established, so it took us by surprise. In the meantime, we continue to see activities. For instance, just a couple days ago, a couple girls sitting on the corner of Locan, one of the individuals from that residence came walking down the street, walking past those young girls multiple times. I observed it myself, staring at them. I contacted the police. The police come out. They speak with the manager of the home. The manager denies that the resident exited the house at all. So the management is not in cooperation with law enforcement in a genuine way, which concerns us all the more. The Paseo, which is to our understanding, a public Clovis Park trail, is right there immediately next to that house where a multitude of children are walking back and forth to school, to home, with sometimes on their own, sometimes with parents. We see people of all ages are walking directly past this house, and the residents who are of this halfway house are staring at them, watching them, and these people have they've started to feel unsafe, and we've noticed they stopped walking on the Paseo. So we've taken the liberty to inform as many people as possible about this situation for their safety, and so that we could address this in kind of in a group setting. So we appreciate immensely that the Wednesday night meeting has been set up. We're definitely going to be there to find out. We have a few very specific questions. For instance, should we have been notified that this halfway house was going to be established? Is there licensing? Is there permits? If there are such licensing and permits, do they have to remain? Can they be revoked? Is there a renewal? How does all of that work? We'd also like to know, was it legal or permitted for it to be next to a Paseo and less than about 0.2 miles away from a school where the principal has been notified and so forth? So we just have a lot of questions that we hope to see answered, and we'd like to know what actions can be taken, especially my own home, because these residents have a two-story home and therefore watch from the window into our backyard. And my wife is at home alone. I'm at work. As I said, I work full-time teaching, so I can't be there constantly to protect her. And we have 4 children, so I'd like to know what actions can be taken for our safety in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll come back, and I'm not going to answer those questions, but I'll kind of wrap it up for you, and then it'll help the staff on Wednesday night frame the discussion for you. So you can we all can be operating from the same set of facts, and then hear what concerns you have, and then what steps are available. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet. Anyone else have anything to add to that, or different than, let's do anybody else on that issue if you don't mind, and then we'll come back. We'll go on to the next issue.
I just want to add, it's less than 1,000 feet from a home daycare as well.
Okay.
It's been in our neighborhood for a while.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Okay. I might make you come up and say all this all over again on the microphone. I think, wait. Okay. I know, we can hear you, but just for the record, it would probably be better to do that. So why don't you go, and then you can follow. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Erica Enan. I am a mother of 4. Unfortunately, the situation has left my kids quarantined in their own house. They can't leave the house to even go play in their backyard due to the situation, due to them being watched by these individuals. It's not normal. There's no other view from their home besides our home and our backyard, and they're not being monitored. Obviously, if somebody's able to get out at 1 o'clock in the morning, they're not being monitored or watched. If they're able to walk down the street and pass by 2 young girls, they're not being monitored or watched. It doesn't seem like there's any management to this home. Other parents may not be informed, and their young children, very, very young children, are walking on this Paseo completely by themselves. The school is closed. It's understandable. People have to work. But parents should be informed. It's not right for parents to be unaware of the situation. God forbid something happens and nobody was informed of this, and their young child who's 7 or 8 who has to walk home because they have no help from family. It's a very wrong situation. I appreciate your help. It's unfair. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Erica. Anyone else on this neighborhood concern here? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll go ahead.
Wait, I already heard what you said. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, so I did a little research.
Name and address.
My name's Brianna Wheeler, and I live on Holland, which is
2 streets up.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
3071 Holland.
Thank you.
Both my boys attend Freedom. I have a kindergartner who's 6 and a 5th grader who's 11. We encourage outdoor play all the time. My 6-year-old lives outside with my neighbor's 6-year-old. They're in the same class, they're best friends, they hop the fence, you know, they live in the front yard. My older one will ride his bike to friends' houses. We encourage that, you know, especially in this day and age. You don't want them consumed by the screen. So I did some measuring. I know that the 2,000 feet, you know, within the, you know, not within 2,000 feet was amended, you know, labeled unconstitutional, which is a load of crap, totally, to be honest. So I measured, and it said to measure in a straight line, it's less than 1,000 feet in a straight line. It's less than 1,000 feet if you measure down the street, up the street to the corner. It's so close. I encourage you to look at the map. It's less than 1,000 feet to the home daycare that's been there for years. They're 1,000 feet from our house. They're 1,200 feet from the park. They're, you know, I could toss a ball and hit the paseo, like you said. These kids walk home from school all the time. You want to encourage that, right? So there's, and, you know, my mother-in-law sits on the city council. Her name's Christine Lingenfelter. So, yeah, I'm aware there was no permit pulled for this. We were not notified. We are less than 2,000 feet from this house. We were not notified. And to have a little background in transitional housing, it's probably somebody taking care of others that also has a problem. That's usually how management goes at a sober living, transitional housing. So they've got a background as well, you know, and this guy has a static 99R level 6, which makes him very likely to reoffend. He owns a house over by the high school. I don't know, why isn't he living at home? So I had to do my research before I came up here and spoke. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. I think on Wednesday night, the facts, kind of we'll establish kind of the shared facts. There are no permits required in the state of California, so there's going to be a lot of facts like that it's not like nobody told you. They probably didn't tell us either. So it's complicated, and I think that's why getting everybody in the room to kind of hear what's what, and then we'll be able to decide. You'll be able to decide, not we, but we'll see what actions. Our chief is here. We'll have the PD here to get you kind of the facts that we all need. And what the city's role is, if any, and what the state role, if any. So I think you'll find Wednesday night, and if you can't come, we can do another meeting the week after, whatever. But we want to make sure we're operating with facts, because it is a scary and emotional thing, and the sort of the rate of escalation on the next door up is what caught my attention, like, whoa, 1 to 80, like that. So anyway, that's why I reached out to John and said we need to do something and make sure we're all kind of operating with the same set of facts. So stand by for more on that, but please, your comment.
Hi, I just live next door to that halfway home, and I don't know what kind of house is that, and my husband even tried to contact the owner, and he just flat away told us that, oh, I don't know what halfway home is. I don't know what's going on in that house. So it's me, my husband, and my son, and we feel very, very unsafe there because we're just next door to that house.
Yeah.
So I'm getting very emotional because we have been living there for the last 20 years, and our backyard is connected. So we feel very, very unsafe. Please look into the matter. There's always a man that's always sometimes standing by your house, by our house. So it's very inconvenient. My son is even talking about, Mom, can we move? I'm like, no, that's our house. They have to move. Please look into the matter.
We are definitely doing that. And thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Is it possible for us to do a live feed on this meeting? There's probably folks who may have daycare issues with the time and everything. Is that possible?
We'll make an effort to do it. If we can't have everybody here, we can have, like the mayor suggested, have a meeting the following Wednesday night to try and capture everybody, which will be a repeat, but more than willing to try and open to get the information out to the residents.
Thank you.
And if we had a little more notice, we could have even met at Freedom, which would have been a lot easier for all of you. So that's a possibility. But in the short notice, we couldn't quite get that. So we thought, well, sooner is better than later in terms of facts, and then we could figure out a different way to reach out. So we do hear you, and I can only imagine that it's scary. So we hear you, our chief of police hears you, council hears you, so we'll do everything in our power to figure this out. So if you don't know our chief of police, you all just looked over at him. Hey, Kurt, stand up. That's our chief of police. And his team. So we've got this. And I think I would just encourage you to continue to call if you are afraid. And I suppose that, I mean, I don't know, is that a fair, if you're afraid, call. That's what they're there for. And so try to take care of this as quickly as we can. Anybody else wanting to comment on the neighborhood issue? Please. Yeah, you bet.
Thank you, Mayor.
You bet.
I just want to say one comment.
Could you say your name, please?
Robert Loera.
Thanks, Robert.
I'm also in the neighborhood. I actually live directly across from them.
Okay.
When they moved in about a month and a half ago or so, they were moving in, and I was at work, and my wife texted me and said, hey, we got some shady people moving in the house because it was empty for a couple months this time. And this is the third renter that I've seen in 11 years. So it's been pretty steady. Two renters in 11 years is pretty good. And it took a while for them to find somebody this time, and I was wondering why. And I told her, calm down, they probably hired somebody from Craigslist, and who you're seeing is probably just somebody that picked up a job on Craigslist and they're moving in, they don't live there. I was wrong, they do. So the reason I wanted to stand up is I'm sure everybody in the room is like, I don't want this to go another week. You know, I hear next Wednesday and then.
This Wednesday, 2 days from now.
Oh, 2 days, okay.
2 days from now.
Okay, all right.
And we could repeat it next Wednesday if we need more to reach more neighbors, so it's 2 days from now.
Okay, I mean, I would rather not have them live there one more day, but, you know, I was thinking at first I thought next month, you know, and then I was.
No, sorry.
And as far as calling the police, you said if you are afraid, call the police. I responded to your message last night. It was very long, and I thought that may be inappropriate, but I had to say what I had to say. Wednesday was my day off, and I don't have many of them, and I cherish them. And Wednesday I got police. One of your CSOs, I think you call them, was beating on my door like really loud. And I was like, who? I looked at my wife and I said things I can't repeat in here, but I said, who is knocking on the door at 7:30 in the morning? Well, we have catalytic converters being stolen in the neighborhood now. I don't know if anybody's brought that up. I was a little late. And he wanted to see my ring footage, and he wanted to know if I had video that was across the street. This lady here, she lives directly across from me, so they are one house over from her. The house next to her is the one that got it stolen. I have been there 11 years, and I have never had anything stolen, ever. Hey, Raj, how you doing? So, you know, I see them, they're walking down the street, they're playing vulgar music, cursing. I don't know if you guys have seen that. I certainly have, because I have a front row view of it. But again, you said call the police. Boy, do the police know about this place. You guys are there almost every day. Chief, you've got to know about this place. One of your officers, and I won't name his name, I asked him, you had helicopters flying around, and there was one night you had helicopters up in the air, several Clovis PD officers scouring the neighborhood looking for this 11-year-old boy that ran out of his house because he couldn't play video games. Helicopter using a loudspeaker. And I'm like, what is going on out there? So I go out there. One of the officers, he says, where do you live? And I said, right here. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry. And I said, why? And he goes, your neighbors. And I was like, yeah, I kind of know about that. This was about, a month ago? So they had been there about 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And I said, what in the heck is going on in that house? I don't know if I should repeat what he said, but
Maybe not.
He said, I mean, these were his exact words. He says, I don't know. You got 20 schizophrenics living in that house or something. That's what he said. And so fast forward about a week, may have been there 3 times probably since I had talked to him last. Same officers outside of my house. And I happen to be coming home, and it's dark, and I saw the same officer. And I said, what now? I can't repeat what he said because there was a curse word in it, but he said basically, I don't freaking know. And he looked in the air. They're fed up. The police are fed up. It's call after call there. And it's not just the police, it's the fire department, it's ambulances at all hours of the night. It's just, I told my wife last night, I said, you know, with all of this, I don't know if you want to call it media attention, but, you know, with the Facebook app and everything blowing up, she goes, I want to move. She's been telling me she wanted to move for a while. And I told her, how are we going to sell our house when we have a halfway house living across the street? How? How are we going to, how? What are we going to get? You live right next door.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I hear you. I get your comments. I don't want this to
I understand there. I understand. Yeah.
So we'll get the facts. The chief has heard your comments. The officer's response is a different problem to solve. So that's that. But we hear you, and so Wednesday night in this room, we'll get you the facts. If y'all can't come or whatever, we'll make sure, and then you can spread the word. These kinds of things go from 1 to 80, just like that, and totally understandable. So we want to help you solve the problem in the ways, the tools that we have. We're not going to have as many tools as you think we have, but the city has some ability to control some of that just by calls for service and others. So there's lots of tools. They may not be the tools that you're all hoping for, but we can tell you what they are. So if you would hold on till Tuesday, Wednesday, now I'm really confused, Wednesday, 6 o'clock, back here. Police, city staff, code enforcement, all city attorney potentially will be able to kind of lay it out factually, and then we can kind of sort of see what's ahead.
Okay.
Okay?
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
All right.
You bet. Thank you so much. Okay, anything else different on the neighborhood issue, please? Yeah, you bet.
Hi. My name's Charlene Tringali, and I live on Ashcroft Avenue, which is 1 street over from this house. And I have 4 young children living at home who normally I let go ride bikes around this sidewalk, and now they can't. One thing I did want to point out, too, not only is it traffic that's going to Freedom, but it's traffic coming up through the neighborhood to head to Rayburn, Clovis East, and Reagan. So we've got, you know, multiple schools going through this area, not just the one. And this is the main path getting through. And, I mean, I see so many kids on my street coming up and down, and just I feel for the people who don't realize what's in the home and are just letting their kids go by there without any knowledge. I mean, I pointed out to my children now, and I hope that we can keep our kids safe and let them continue playing outside.
You bet.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you so much. All right, we'll leave this topic potentially. Anyone else? Wednesday, 6 o'clock, this Wednesday. Next. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here.
Mayor, if I may, there is one participant online that would like to speak on this topic.
Okay, and I was also going to mention that we also have letters. We have quite a few letters today, and a number of them are regarding this. A number are regarding chickens. Really, can't make it up. And another regarding whoever takes care of the alarm that goes off at Tractor Supply every night for hours says, "My vote for life." That is worth paying attention to. So, a noise complaint at Tractor Supply. But let's hear the online comment on this item.
All right, Megan, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, Council. Hello, Mayor. My name is Megan Murphy, and while I do not live, oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. While I do not live in the neighborhood, I do have my aunt and uncle and 3 young cousins who do live in the neighborhood. I will try and keep this brief, but my background is I used to be a senior probation and parole officer with the state of Idaho who specialized in supervising high-risk sex offenders. And while everyone here has made a good point, I would like to specifically just touch on some things that I hope will get talked about on Wednesday regarding the sex offenders specifically. As I stated, I supervised them for several years, and I do know that sex offenders with crimes against children are usually generally more likely to recidivate and reoffend and have more victims. In addition, I am very concerned as to how this sex offender got approval to live at that house. Obviously, California is very different from Idaho, but at least when I was a PO, we had to go out and check the vicinity of every house that a sex offender wanted to stay. I know people are short-staffed and I know they are overworked, but even looking on Google Maps, which we did have to do occasionally, you can very clearly see that the house is very close to a school. If you drive through the neighborhood from an officer point of view, you can see, you know, bicycles and balls and chalk on the sidewalk. So it is very, very concerning to me as to how this sex offender specifically got approved. And I hope that on Wednesday, something to that degree will be addressed, because personally, I do not have children yet, but that is specifically what worries me the most when it comes to the young children in the neighborhood. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background and hope that something, you know, that will be talked about on Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Anyone else online, Carrie, for this item?
That is all.
He wants to talk about something else. Okay, thank you. All right. Are you on this topic or a new topic?
No, I'm not.
All right, a new topic. Go ahead.
My name is Steve Trevino. I live at 1663 Bullard.
Wait, you have a letter in here too, don't you?
I sent a picture to the city manager.
Yes, you did.
If I can make two quick comments, I'd appreciate it.
You have 5 minutes. Talk as long as you want for 5 minutes.
Last week, I was walking on Clovis Avenue. I go for my morning walks, and this, I think it was a 53-foot trailer or 48. He was going down 5th Street and makes a right-hand turn. I'm sorry. He was coming down Clovis Avenue and made a right-hand turn, right, going towards the 500 Club, and made a right. And he almost didn't make that turn. And I've noticed lately, because, you know, I'm a truck driver, I'm a retired truck driver, so I notice these things. But I've noticed a lot of trucks making these turns on Clovis onto 5th Street, either making a right or going north, or making a right going south. And one of these days, there's gonna be an accident. And that's as a matter of fact, I recorded it, but you know what? I don't know how to send it to the city or anything like that.
Well, you just sent it to the city, so it has been received at the city.
Okay. The second comment is...
I know, is it something you said? You made everybody leave. Do you have that effect on every party or something?
Okay, second comment is, you know what? I don't like Donald Trump. And I'm sure some of you don't like President Biden. But that's not my point. My point is that if you're going to drive around town or you're going to walk around town, you shouldn't have any kind of shirts or a big sign driving around town saying F whoever. And, you know, there's a lot of things I don't like about City of Clovis. There's people, politicians I don't like. But I'm not going to go out and put a sign on the back of my car saying F whoever, you know. It isn't kosher. It isn't right. And I don't know if it's illegal or not, but it's not the right thing to do. You know, and the other day I went to a store and there was a guy, F Trump. And I went to the store the other day at Dollar General. And right there on the truck, F Biden, you know. And you know what? As an American, and I know a lot of you listen to, you hear, hello, what's that? There's a slogan for Biden, you know, for F Biden. But I don't remember it right now off the top of my head. But you know what? We're all Americans, and I know we all have our political opinions, but there's no reason for that. And nobody should be going around town with big signs like that. I don't know if it's against the law or not, but I just wanted to point that out.
Well, thank you for doing that. I'm not a lawyer. I don't think it's against the law, but people do not have very good manners anymore. So it is just really bad form. So thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Can I say something,
You bet.
sir?
Steve?
You can bet this guy with this picture, he's probably not married. Because his wife would never permit him to drive around or park his car in front of the house like that.
I don't know if you got the picture or not. I sent it to the.
We have the picture.
We have it.
It's not up on the
married.
screen for a reason. Thank you so much. All right, anyone else in the audience with a public comment on an item that isn't on our agenda tonight? All right. And I think I captured all of the public letters that we had. Keep an eye on the Tractor Supply alarm, is what I'd say. All right. Next, ordinances and resolutions. With respect to the approval of resolutions and ordinances, the reading of the title shall be deemed a motion to waive a reading of the complete resolution or ordinance unless there's a request by a council member that the resolution or ordinance be read in full. Further reading shall be deemed waived by unanimous consent of the council. And then next is consent calendar. These items are routine in nature. They're handled with one affirmative vote for all. In this case tonight, 6 items, unless someone from the council or the public would like to pull an item from this agenda. Anybody from the council wishing to pull a consent calendar item? None. Anyone in the audience coming to speak specifically to a consent calendar item? Online?
No.
All right, I'll bring it back to the city council.
Motion to approve the consent calendar items 1 through 6.
Second?
I'll second it.
Motion is second to approve the consent calendar as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5 in favor, 0 opposed or abstaining. Under administrative items tonight, these are matters of regular business on our council agenda. The first is a resolution accepting and authorizing the submission of the 2022 General Plan Annual Progress Report, including the 2022 Housing Element Annual Progress Report to the Governor's Office of Planning and Research and the California Department of Housing and Community Development. Dave Merchant, an odd setup for you all. City Planner, Lily Chaw's the Senior Planner. Well, and I don't know, who's going to start it off? Dave.
Thank you, Mayor. As you noted, this is a discussion of the General Plan Annual Progress Report and the authorization to submit a report to the state. We'll make a brief presentation this evening to kind of make room for the primary discussion this evening, which is a joint meeting with your Planning Commission to talk about the 6th cycle housing element. So we'll keep this relatively brief on the APR. An annual progress report on the general plan is required by the government code. It's due by April 1st of every year. That's why we're considering this item this evening, because it's the last opportunity that we have before the April 1st deadline. The APR provides the council and the public with information on general plan implementation, and the housing element APR is the primary component of this process. The APR is structured into 7 sections as well as an appendix. The first 3 sections are pretty static. They're a little bit of an update from year to year, but they're relatively the same, or at least they look the same from year to year. Section 4 is a discussion of the general plan amendments that have been considered in any given year. Sections 5 and 6 are new this year, and I'll talk just briefly about those in just a minute. And then Section 7 and the appendix are relative to a housing development update. So with regard to general plan amendments, there were 3 general plan amendments that were submitted in 2022. The first listed there is GPA 22-001 for Stallion Development. That was submitted back in January. That was submitted early in 2022, and just recently was considered by the City Council, at which point the application was denied. The other 2 applications were both City of Clovis applications, 2022-02, was a mapping error correction at what is the hotel site at Clovis Avenue and Freeway 168. And 2022-003 was a incorporation of VMC policies into the city circulation element. So all three of those applications were submitted in 2022 and have since reached their final conclusion. Up at the top end of this table, you'll see there are 4 general plan amendments that were submitted in 2021. All of those applications are still pending in 2023, so they've been through quite a process, and they're all projected to come to the council for consideration during the current calendar year. We are hopeful, at least, and if not, this should be done in 2024 at the latest. If I had some wood close by, I would knock on it, but that's what we're projecting. With the exception of the housing element portion, there are relatively few requirements in an annual progress report with regard to the general plan itself. Local agencies are encouraged to determine what local relevant issues should be included in the APR. We've added 2 this year in response to some, I guess, frequent questions that come up. One is the addition of a short section that talks about the potential for a general plan update, and that focuses on the general plan review and audit that's currently underway. Consider that with your planning commission at a joint meeting in February. We're expecting an admin draft of the final report here in a couple of weeks, and then it should be to the commission and council in either May or June. And then there's a section that talks about major projects that are pending, and that identifies several major projects that include general plan amendments that should be coming to you in either 2023 or 2024. Those are major projects that, in addition to general plan amendments, include large residential projects of several hundred lots, specific plans, master plans, spheres of influence, expansions, and annexations. So there's quite a number of those projects that are coming your way. So we wanted to give you an update on what those projects look like and a ballpark of when they should be coming to your body for consideration. So like these additional projects or these additional sections, new issues and topics can be added into any future APRs. If you have any topics that you think you might like to have included, you can let us know very informally. We've added these because they were not specifically requested, but we've had a fair number of questions about these kinds of things over the last year or so. As I noted, the primary component of the APR process is the housing element, and I'm going to hand it to Lily, and she'll walk you through the housing element APR.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, Council. Alrighty, so the Housing Element Annual Progress Report, what it does is it documents the city's progress towards meeting towards the implementation of its housing element programs, as well as meeting its 5th cycle regional housing needs allocation residential units. In the report is data related to both building activity as well as entitlement activity for the year 2022. And as Dave indicated, the APR must be submitted to HCD and the OPR by April 1st. So the city was allocated for its 5th cycle regional housing needs allocation, a total of 6,328 units, and they are broken down there by the income category, which are very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. So when it comes to the relationship between density and income levels, the city's responsibility for RENA is to ensure that we have adequately zoned lands to accommodate development of residential units within each of these income categories. And that's generally measured by density. So for the 5th cycle, HCD says that any sites that are to be allocated towards lower income designated sites, they must allow for at least 20 units per acre. And then for moderate income sites, it's typically the multifamily designation that does not meet the default density of 20 units per acre. And then for above moderate income sites, those are single family designated sites. So when it comes to actual affordability of residential units that are developed, what the city actually ends up counting in its annual progress, in its housing element APR, affordability is determined based on the household income and size. And so affordability is measured in both rent and ownership. And so this table here is just to provide you an example, and what it does is it breaks down the affordability level of each of the income groups based on the household and income size. So, for example, very low income household, for a household of four, the income for that household would look like $38,950, and then what would be considered affordable rent would be around $974. And then for purchase price of a home, it's $155,500. And so we have those assumptions for both interest rate of 4.5 to 7%. And this table was taken from your housing element draft for the sixth cycle. And this is just to provide you an example of how affordability is broken down. So far, actually, before we go there, in 2022, we were able to count 7 residence units towards the very low income category, and then another 7 units towards the low income category. A total of 382 units for moderate income and 458 units for above moderate income. And so far in our planning period for the 5th cycle, we have already met the requirements for both our moderate and above moderate income categories. We have a total remaining of 2,314 units for very low and 978 units for the low income categories. Also in our housing element and the APR, we also report on our progress or our housing element programs. Currently, the city has 20 housing element programs with the 5th cycle housing element, and it's an opportunity for the city to provide updates on how we are doing with these programs to HCD. A couple examples are the home repair grant, which is a part of the housing and rehabilitation program. In 2022, the city did provide home repair grants to about 16 low-income households. And then in regards to the Affordable Housing Incentive Program, the city had reduced development impact fees for a couple of low-income or supportive housing projects. For example, the Butterfly Garden, which was completed in 2022. The city allocated a total of $300,000 towards reducing the development costs for that development. So those are just some updates on some of the city's programs. With that concludes our report, and we are open for any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Dave and Lily. Are there any comments or questions for staff from the council? Drew?
Lily, could you go back to the slide where you talk about the cost per, right there, that one there. I would imagine that when the interest rates were 2%, the affordability threshold was probably in the 200s, I would imagine. I mean, the average cost of housing now is at least 300. So without some subsidies from different sources, it's going to be difficult for someone to have a return on investment unless this is totally paid for by the government, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Others? Matt?
So just to clarify, even though it has a land designation, we can designate all the land we want, but we still have to meet the criteria that's on the affordability cost sheet that's listed.
So the affordability criteria is when we do count residential units within those income categories for the APR reporting purposes. The city's responsibility when it comes to the the arena allocated units, we need to make sure that we have lands available for development for each of those income units. So we do that through density as indicated. But yes, when we do measure or report on the actual affordability of residential units that are developed, we have to do so in accordance with something like this criteria here, which is what's established by our consultants.
Okay. So just looking at the income levels for extremely low, I don't know of anything being built that would even come close to fitting this criteria. Even if you designated all the land, I mean, I'm just trying to understand that part of it, grasp it, because I know there's requirements and stuff that we need to meet as a city, but we really don't have any control in a lot of respects over what the rent's going to be for a place. And I don't know of anything that's even come close to that right now, from an affordability standpoint.
And you are correct.
Especially 2,314 units.
Right, yes, and you are correct. I think that's the purpose of our program, is to help incentivize or facilitate affordable housing, typically affordable housing developers, to provide deed-restricted residential units. So we do have a couple of projects that fall within that very low income category. I think a lot of those residential unit numbers in terms of reporting in our last year's report.
Thank you.
Like Butterfly Gardens was in last year's report, yeah?
Correct.
Yeah. Vaughn.
Yeah. Maybe so for CDBG funds, which really are the very few funds that the city gets. So it was just $127,000 where we sort of helped with the affordable housing, those who are in census tracts that need help housing-wise. Is that pretty much it? Was there more, even with ARPA, or was 127 was that the number?
So I think that was what was reported. I know that, housing allocates the fundings that they get to different pots per se. So maybe Andy could kind of clarify that.
Yeah, in the APR, it was reporting on the number of units in that program, which was housing and rehabilitation, and that was the CDBG funds that were used for that.
This amount was what was used for what is required to be reported?
Correct.
Okay,
yeah.
But we do get more than that.
So we do get more CDBG than that. Okay. That is correct. There were funds such as ARPA, a lot of those ran through the county for rental assistance and those kinds of things that weren't represented in the APR. They weren't in creation or preserving of units.
And in this last year, we did not receive any funds to assist with purchases or from the state, because I know that's where we're going to have to look for funding, but we as a city have not received any. I just wanted to be sure.
2 cycles ago, we received a grant for $1 million from the state of California for down payment assistance. The state put that funding on hold due to HUD changing the rules and them having to change the program. We're still waiting on a green light to move forward on that program. Okay. We also received $5 million in CalHome funds that's been directed toward rehabilitation of homes. So, and that is just beginning this year, essentially.
Okay. Yeah. So we have those funds, $1 million sort of in the wings, $5 million where we're just starting to implement.
Correct.
And it may show up in the next year or something.
We submitted an application for another $5 million in CalHome funds recently.
Okay. And does that look likely, do we think, or is it pretty competitive, or is it pretty generous to a lot of jurisdictions to get that?
Some of the scoring criteria includes how recently you were awarded funds, so we aren't as likely to receive the second $5 million grant award I just described as we were when we got it originally.
And how, I guess, let me see. So reports on the GPA, all the GPAs that was listed from Dave, but the housing element portion is a big part of this report, is what I'm understanding?
Correct.
Okay. And then that also plays into sort of the next agenda item, because that was part of the report.
Yes, the next agenda item would be the upcoming cycle of housing element requirements.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
So we have, this chart that's up there that shows kind of the income breakdown, and then I believe it was the previous one that showed what our permitted units by affordability was. Is that it? And it showed the breakdown of our total of 6,000, yeah, that total, and then breaking it down by the income categories. How was that done, the breakdown part?
So it's a regional effort. So the region is Fresno COG. The region is allocated a number from the state. So the state decides what the housing needs are.
Okay.
And so FCOG, along with all the representatives from each of the jurisdictions, come together to come up with a methodology in terms of how we allocate these funds. And so we actually, for the state cycle, we had that process last year, and those methodologies were adopted, and then our numbers are adopted.
So ultimately, the breakdown between the income levels is told to us by the state?
It's the methodology that's developed in the jurisdiction, but yes, the state allocates the actual.
And so the totality of this whole housing element issue is a state-driven situation?
Correct.
So when we're talking about affordability of housing, is there anything that the state is willing to kind of participate in all of the onerous mandates and regulations and laws that they're passing out of Sacramento? They're making it more and more difficult on us here locally to provide that. We're talking about environmental issues, vehicle miles traveled, all of these things that are coming to us from Sacramento. Are we supposed to then just take all of that and still try to come up with this, which clearly from the income chart is impossible to manage these things? Is it a two-way street here, or are we just having to take all of what comes out of Sacramento and deal with it?
You can just say yes. Yes. Thank you.
I'm not sure that's exactly how I would describe it. So, I mean, I think it's complicated. It's really a county. The numbers are really distributed by Fresno County. So I just think we have to be sort of mindful about how this all rolls up. And it's not impossible. It's our job to make it as possible as we can. And not having the incentives on housing that we used to have over the years makes it much more difficult. Right, and so I think that's Clovis's challenge. Development should pay its way, so we've tried to reduce fees and all the rest. So those things converge into this discussion always. But our job is to try to make it as possible as we can, right, so that as many people as choose to live here can. So I think that's
No, I just kind of want to make it a little more clear that it's this issue of Clovis being able to deal with our own community needs and Fresno County being able to deal with county needs. And we have to face the challenge of other jurisdictions up the chain, making, frankly, that more difficult on us. And so as we move into this discussion of housing element with our planning commission and all of that, I think it's just important to understand that there's other factors at play too and how we come to have to deal with these things.
Okay. I may not see it that way, but I mean, I think probably both are right. Probably both are correct, I would say. Anything else for staff?
You know, I know that you noted in here with regards to resale and rentals that they are not counted, and I think that is something which we will have to address with our legislatures to change. But in looking at this and being on the Housing Economic Development Committee, I mean, the questions are there, but I still think it's a valid point in that should a home next door rents for whatever it is that it fits in those scales, it is a new unit coming on in which a family can come in, yet that is never counted. And I think if we look at that realistically, it helps everyone in the state. And so that is something that is there. And even a resale, it's not considered a new unit, so they don't, meaning the state's law doesn't count it as well. Yet there are homes in which can be sold and or given even to people to live in an affordable way, yet that is not taken into account. And I think that's something in which we may consider, going to our legislatures to help change how the housing element is counted. The other one is, we mentioned it in our committee, but I think there's still no traction or no movement, is with regards to sharing and or bartering of numbers, because some cities can do a lot better in certain categories, yet, maybe Madera County is doing a better job, yet there's no collaboration. It's just you're allocated Fresno this much, Clovis you have this much. There can be a boom in we'll just say Orange Cove, and they can go above their numbers, but it doesn't help the overall where, hey, you're doing better here, let's allow you to reallocate these numbers in Fresno County. And that's something that our committee, meaning the Housing Economic Development Committee, has talked about, because there are certain areas that can build certain types of housing much more effectively and efficiently. And that's something in which I think the state needs to look at to go, okay, maybe there is a way to sort of change these numbers around or swap them around, especially for the cities that are doing great in one of these categories. So just wanted to put that out.
Seems like they apply the regional definition when it works for them, and when it doesn't apply to them, right, it doesn't work as well. Yeah. Anything else for staff? Anyone in the audience wishing to comment on item number 7, the resolution accepting the 2022 annual progress report? Should have had you sit in the front row.
Good evening, Mayor Ashbeck, members of the council. My name is Patience Milrod. I represent Desiree Martinez, whose name I'm sure you all know. There's just one thing I wanted to mention about your annual performance report, and that is that there's a material omission in it. The Superior Court has determined that the number of units Clovis actually needs to rezone for is this number plus 4,400. So that, as you know, the matter went to the Court of Appeal, got argued. We don't know what's going to happen. But if I were HCD and the Governor's Office of Planning, I would want to know, like maybe a footnote, a little asterisk. The Superior Court says this might be a bigger number. We still think we're fine. I mean, I understand nobody's admitting anything here, but it does seem a material omission, and it ought to be flagged. I know it's already flagged in your housing element draft, but not in a way that suggests that really your contingency plan might have to be, I hope you're making one, but, anyway, I just wanted to mention that. So this is it's Table D, item 4, I think. Your staff will have it, but I think it needs a footnote.
Thank you, Patience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Staff, you want to comment on that?
I think we understand the comment. At this point, we have a certified housing element, and this HCD did accept the carryover program back in 2018 or 19. We'll consult with the attorney's office to see if we should add a footnote, but at this point, I don't think that's part of the program.
Okay. Appreciate the comment. Let our attorney weigh in on that. All right. Please, Des.
There we go. Sorry. Good evening, Des House. I just want to appreciate the efforts with the department in regards to planning and zoning for the housing. RHNA numbers are a very tricky thing, and getting there is always going to be an uphill battle, especially in Clovis. I do wish that council would pay attention to a couple bills that are out there right now on the legislative floor being argued, specifically ACA 10, which is just fundamental human right to housing, and there's not really a lot of description as to what that means, but the lift is going to be on the state and local jurisdictions, and when it comes to planning and zoning, there's a couple of other ones in regards to applications for rezoning, and based on the numbers that the state has, it gets very convoluted. So there's probably about 14 different bills out there right now that are on the legislative floor being argued on that. So just if you could get involved and keep an eye on that, especially going through this process.
Thanks. I think that's why Mayor Pro Tem Wanatu is on that committee, and so I think he hears those things as well as our staff. So thank you for the heads up on those. Anything else? Anyone online? No. Close the public portion, bringing it back to the council. This is looking for a motion to accept and authorize the submission of this annual progress report.
Motion to approve the resolution accepting and authorizing submission of the 2022 General Plan Annual Progress Report to the Department, California Department of Housing and Community Development.
Second. Matt, yeah? There's a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right. We are now going to adjourn, but we're not going to move, to the joint meeting with the Clovis Planning Commission. So, as that old game show said, come on down and have a seat up here. I would offer, if anyone in the audience is in need of an interpreter, we have interpreter services available for this item. So I would invite you, she's waving, thank you, over here.
Mayor, if I may, before we get started with item number 8, I'd like to just note for the record that all planning commissioners are present for this meeting.
Thanks, Carrie. Feels weird to be sitting up here while you all are sitting down there. All right, so we are now going to proceed with this joint workshop with our Clovis Planning Commission. Hello, friends. How are you all? Did I hear today was the first day of spring? Happy first day of spring. Yeah, that's what I heard. So our workshop tonight is to review and provide comments to be incorporated into the draft 6th cycle of the housing element. And Lily, looks like you are the staff on this.
Thank you, Mayor. So as you all know, we've been working on the 6th cycle housing element update. We kind of started this endeavor back in early 2021. We contracted on with Ascent Environmental to help us with our annual progress reports, kind of help guide us through the RHNA methodology process with Fresno COG, and then, of course, help us with updating our housing element to the 6th cycle. I have Chelsea here with me. She's with the consulting group Ascent Environmental. She's very well versed in housing, and she did work on the multi-jurisdictional housing element effort for the 5th cycle, which we were a part of. So
I wasn't listening. Could you say that again? Oh, he was talking to me. It was really his fault. Trying to pay attention. Say that first part, that next part, the last part.
So I have Chelsea here with me with Ascent Environmental. She is very well aware of the Clovis area. She worked on the 5th cycle multi-jurisdictional housing element effort, which we were a part of.
I knew I didn't recognize it. I'm like, wait, I think she just told me who that was. Thanks for being here, Chelsea.
So the intent for tonight is to provide both the planning commissioners and the council members with an overview of the sixth cycle housing element draft, and then to just collect some feedback from you so that we can incorporate or modify as needed before we do submit to HCD for first rounds of review. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Chelsea.
All right, thank you very much, Lily. Good evening, Mayor, members of the Council, and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Chelsea Payne, Director of Urban Planning with Ascent, and as Lily said, I've been doing this work around the state and here in Clovis for maybe 8 or so years, assisting with the last housing element, this housing element, as well as several of the past APRs. So I'm very familiar with Clovis and very familiar with housing element requirements, more than I would like to these days. So here's an outline of tonight's presentation. I'm going to start with a very high-level brief overview of the housing element requirements, touch on some of the key trends from the housing needs assessment, talk about the regional housing needs allocation for this upcoming sixth cycle, as well as a summary of your sites inventory. I'm going to touch on a new requirement, which is the fair housing assessment, and then focus on several of the key implementation programs from the housing plan. And then we'll wrap up with talking about next steps in the process. So first, a quick overview. You just heard about your annual progress report on the fifth cycle. So some of this is a bit of recycling some information, but as you know, the housing element is a required element of the general plan. It's required of all cities and counties across the state of California. And it's the city's plan to meet housing needs of all community members at all income levels, as well as a plan to accommodate the city's fair share of the future regional housing needs. The housing element has some very unique requirements that set it apart from the rest of the general plan. The first thing is that the state mandates when the housing element has to be updated and adopted. The adoption deadline is December 31st of this year, and the housing element is updated on an 8-year update cycle. So the rest of the general plan, there are no strict mandates for how frequently it has to be updated, but the housing element is due on a very specific deadline. It's also the only element of the general plan that's reviewed for compliance with state law, and HCD, or the California Department of Housing and Community Development, is responsible for that certification. You can see here how the draft sixth cycle housing element is organized. It's organized around these 8 chapters, starting with an introduction that provides an overview of the requirements and a summary of the community engagement that happened mostly last fall. Chapter 2 is the housing plan, so the goals, policies, and implementation programs for the next 8 years. The housing needs assessment has a lot of demographic data around population, and households, housing units, and employment trends. The assessment of fair housing, or Chapter 4, is a new requirement to identify any barriers to equal housing opportunities. The sites inventory is contained in Chapter 5, so that section describes all of the available housing sites and the capacity for housing development over the next 8 years. Chapter 6 is the constraints, where we have to assess any potential governmental or non-governmental constraints on housing production. 7 describes opportunities for energy savings, and then 8 is an evaluation of the programs in your current fifth cycle housing element. Here's our overall project schedule. We kicked off the housing element last summer with planning for some community engagement in the fall. We had a community workshop in the month of August. We conducted some stakeholder interviews with local developers, advocates, builders in the region to understand housing needs, issues, and get ideas for new programs. And we had an online survey that was widely distributed around the community. And then through the winter and up until last week, we were working very closely with staff on preparing this document, the Public Review Draft Housing Element, which we published a week ago on Monday. On Wednesday, we had a community workshop presenting the draft housing element, and then we're here tonight for the joint study session. The public, the public review period, there will be a 30-day public review period on this draft housing element that will end on April 12th. And after that date, we will submit it to the state for their review. The state will have 90 days for their first review, at which point we expect we'll get a comment letter of comments that we need to address. We'll revise the draft, make it available for another public review, resubmit to the state, and for every subsequent review, the state has 60 days to complete that review. Our goal is to bring the housing element back to the Planning Commission and City Council before the December 31st adoption deadline. So I'm going to touch now on some of the, excuse me, getting over bronchitis here, some of the housing needs assessments, some of the demographic data.
Chelsea, a quick question on that timeline. When HCD makes amendments, it won't be coming back to us. It'll just go to the public, I'm assuming.
That's correct. At least at this point, what's in my scope of work is this meeting here and a meeting at the end. Okay. But if there are some key policy issues that need to be discussed, we would talk about whether that merits coming back for some policy direction before resubmitting. So we look at population growth and housing trends in the housing element. And the population in Clovis has grown by an average of over 20,000 people per decade, from about 33,000 in 1980 to over 120,000 in 2020. And between 2021 and 2022, Clovis was the 12th fastest growing city in California in terms of numeric change. The 2022 population was nearly 124,000. The housing stock in Clovis is about 76% single-family homes. Multifamily units make up about 22% of the housing stock, and 2% of the housing stock are mobile homes, which also provide an important source of affordable housing in the city. Like many communities in California, Clovis has seen some substantial rises in home sale prices in recent years. This slide shows home values, not home sale prices, but what you can see is that since 2017, home values have increased by about 60%, and home values in Clovis, they're shown in blue, which are in the middle of that chart, kind of hard to see, but the line on the bottom are the average home values in the city of Fresno. So Clovis home values are higher relative to Fresno, but at the top of the chart you see the average home values in the state of California. So relative to the state, Clovis is a much more affordable place to live. But similarly, here in Clovis, across the state, rents are also on the rise. In 2020, the median gross rent was over $1,200, and rents have continued to climb with an average rent of about $1,600 for a two-bedroom unit in 2023. We talked a little bit in the last item about affordability at different income levels. What you see here are the income limits for Fresno County for a one-person household and then a three-person household from extremely low to moderate income. So a low-income one-person household is defined as a household earning less than $43,650, somewhere in the middle of the chart. And a low-income three-person household, the upper income limit of that is $56,100. So at about $56,000, an affordable monthly rent would be about $1,400 a month. Average rents in Clovis are generally affordable to median and moderate income households, but not to low, very low, or extremely low, and that's very common, that market rents really don't meet the needs of lower income households in California. For sale housing is now, especially in the current interest rates, generally only affordable to above moderate income households that earn more than the incomes that are shown here. And increases in housing costs have affected the ability to afford housing across the state and here in Clovis. A household is considered cost burden if they pay more than 30% of their income on housing costs. And cost burden disproportionately affects renter households. You can see that about 45% of renters in Clovis experience cost burden, meaning they're spending more than 30% on housing. And about 25% of owner-occupied or homeowners experience cost burden in Clovis. I mentioned that a significant new requirement for this housing element is to address fair housing. And this new requirement was established by Assembly Bill 686. This bill requires all public agencies in California, all cities, counties, all state agencies and departments to ensure that all housing and community development programs affirmatively further fair housing. And what that means is taking meaningful action to combat discrimination, overcome patterns of segregation, and foster inclusive communities where everyone has equal access to opportunities. So there's a new chapter, Chapter 4 in the housing element, the Fair Housing Assessment, and I'm just going to highlight a few of the key findings. There are a lot of new requirements for what has to go into this fair housing assessment. We have to look at fair housing issues from both a regional perspective as well as a local perspective. And this has really become the focus of the HCD's review for this cycle. A lot of the delays in getting housing elements certified as in compliance come back to all of the new requirements around the fair housing assessment. So first here we look at income patterns in Clovis compared to the region. And household incomes in Clovis are on average higher than Fresno County and statewide median incomes. About 31% of households in Clovis are considered low income, which is less than other jurisdictions in the county. This is one of the reasons that Clovis was assigned a higher lower income housing target compared to other jurisdictions, and I'm going to talk about your housing target in just a few minutes. Looking at income patterns within Clovis, you can see that household incomes are highest in the newer growth areas to the east and to the north, those being in the darker blue color, and then in the lighter color, the lower incomes are in the more established older neighborhoods in Clovis. Clovis is less racially and ethnically diverse compared to the rest of Fresno County, and non-white residents are more prevalent in the older, more established areas of the city. In the housing element, we analyze what's called racially or ethnically concentrated areas of affluence, and these are areas that have a larger white population relative to the regional average, and that have incomes that are 125% of the area median income for the county. So thinking about the last two maps, it's not surprising that those same areas that have higher incomes, the newer growth areas, are also classified as RCAAs, or racially concentrated areas of affluence, as shown in the blue color. These areas also mostly contain lower density single-family homes, which tend to be affordable to higher income households. And then the final fair housing indicator that I'm going to talk about tonight is access to opportunity. So the state prepares opportunity maps that classify all of the census tracts across the state as low, moderate, high, or highest resource. And the high and highest resource census tracts, those are shown in the shades of blue. Those are the areas that are considered to have the greatest access to goods, resources, and services that offer people the best chance at economic advancement, educational attainment, and good health. All of Clovis is classified as high and highest resource, and the state, through AB 686, is looking to ensure that cities' high resource areas create opportunities for lower income housing. Higher resource areas are also more competitive for affordable housing financing. So this is another reason that the city's lower income housing target is relatively higher than other lower resourced parts of the county.
Can I ask you a question? After you cough. Sorry. So this is, I caught whatever you had. This is new, yeah. So what this is saying is, this is good, right? That our entire community has access to food and no food deserts and no transit and green space and walking, and that's what this says, yeah?
Correct.
And schools and shopping.
Yes, that's correct.
And then the rest of your sentence was, and because of this, then maybe the interest in the city of Clovis providing more affordable housing is based on this, that really wherever you had housing in the city of Clovis, according to this map, you'd be able to access all those things I just said. Am I tracking you on that?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I think one of my last statements was that this was one of the factors in the methodology for the regional housing needs assessment. So there are a lot of factors that go into the distribution of the RHNA, and access to opportunity was one of them. And so jurisdictions with higher access to opportunity were generally granted a higher RHNA target. There are so many things wrong with that hypothesis, but I hear you. So, all right, I just wanted to make sure that I was reading and hearing you right. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Hey, Chelsea, can you go to the chart before that one? RC. Can you explain this again?
Sure. Yeah, so the areas shown in blue are classified by the state, and this is a map provided by HCD on a data mapping viewer that they have online. These are areas that I think the percentage is that the percentage of the white population is 125% of the regional average, and incomes are 125% higher than the regional average. And large portions of Clovis are classified as RCAs because incomes are relatively higher here. And then relative to other parts of Fresno County, there's a larger white population in Clovis compared to other areas.
So if there was a section that had high-earning Asians, it wouldn't show up then? We're only looking at...
That's correct.
At prosperous whites, not
that's
prosperous
what this
other
is
colors.
measuring.
Okay. I have a question then. I'll just go ahead and ask it.
I was tracking, I was still thinking about, okay, go ahead.
Is there a way, looking at this particular map, is there a way of quantifying the resale of houses? Right, I've had 3 houses. One was on the bottom of this chart. The second one was towards the middle. The third one was towards the top. Is there a way of showing, how people buy low, sell, buy again, sell, buy again? Is there a way of showing that? I mean, because I think that tells another story, that, you have people who, when I was 30, I wasn't making a lot of money. I had 2 kids. I was a single parent. I had to make the mortgage every month, didn't have a lot of money left over. I got a little older, married a beautiful woman. We had 2 incomes. I got child support. I was able to get another place. And also, I'm kind of going with that, with age comes affluence a lot of times. Is there a way of quantifying the ages of different areas? Because I bet we don't have a whole bunch of first-time home buyers up in the top.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. We don't have that level of data in the housing element. What we have to do in the housing element is we map all of these indicators, and we have to come up with programs based on our findings, but also we have to look at the location of your sites inventory in relation to all of these indicators. And we have to conclude whether or not there's opportunity in some of the higher income areas, in some of the RCAAs, in some of your highest resource areas, which is most of Clovis, for lower income housing opportunity. And what we conclude in the housing element is that housing opportunities are well distributed around Clovis. There are a lot of opportunities for high-density housing in your new growth areas, in your higher income areas. So that's what we're looking at. That's what the state's looking at. That the opportunity is spread out. What we find in many cities is that the majority of the lower income opportunity is in the lower resource areas, the areas without access to opportunity, but that's not what we find here in Clovis.
Planning Commission, this isn't just all about us up here. You guys, any comments, questions? Want to keep going? Chime in later? You're good? Okay, keep going.
I know there's a lot of information coming at you tonight, and this is a very thick document. So I'm going to talk next about another really important component of the housing element, which is the sites inventory. We have to demonstrate that the city has adequate sites to accommodate its fair share of the regional housing needs. And we talked about this with the last item, but here in California, housing needs are assessed at a regional level based on projected population growth and other factors. So a regional housing target, or it's called a regional housing needs determination, is assigned by the state to every region in California. And then the regional government, here that's the Fresno Council of Governments, or FCOG. FCOG develops a methodology to distribute that regional housing need to every jurisdiction. And that process is called the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, or the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. And there are a lot of different factors that have to go into that RHNA methodology, and the methodology has to be approved by the state. But that process for the sixth cycle has been completed, and the RHNA methodology has been adopted. So HCD assigned the Fresno region over 58,000 housing units to be accommodated over the sixth cycle planning period. And then based on the adopted RHNA methodology, Clovis's portion of that RHNA is just under 9,000 housing units.
And those are 9,000 units plus the ones in our current cycle.
This is for the next housing element cycle. So essentially, the slate is wiped clean at the start of the planning period.
Okay.
And this is your new target to plan for.
Okay, so it's not additive.
From January 1st, 2024, going forward.
Okay, thanks.
Well, the RHNA period starts a little sooner than that, but this is a new construction target. So this is about opportunities for meeting future housing needs, not so much current housing needs, but it's a new construction target. And as you saw earlier, the RHNA is broken down by different income categories from very low, low, moderate to above moderate. And this slide shows you the current 2015 to 2023 RHNA compared to the sixth cycle 2023 to 2031 RHNA. And so your, excuse me, the city's RHNA for the next planning period is quite a bit higher at almost 9,000 units. And we're just showing here the total combined lower income RHNA, which is a combination of the very low and low income categories. That total combined target is 4,475 lower income units. You can also see how your RHNA compares to the City of Fresno's total RHNA. The City of Fresno was given a RHNA of almost 37,000, and then the unincorporated county has a RHNA target of 2,350. In order to accommodate the RHNA, the city has to zone enough land that's suitable for a variety of different housing types at different density points. And this is really an oversimplification. We know that density doesn't equate directly to affordability, but this is sort of describing the assumptions that are behind your site's inventory. So essentially, if you have a site that's zoned for low-density single-family housing, we assume that that site's going to meet your above moderate income need. Sites that are more medium density, where you can build duplexes, fourplexes, triplexes, lower density multifamily, those are counted towards your moderate income RHNA. And then sites that specifically allow for 30 units per acre can be counted towards your lower income RHNA. Your default, that's the 30 units per acre is called the default density standard. That's the density at which it's assumed that's an appropriate density for lower income housing development. The target used to be 20 units per acre, but when the city's population surpassed 100,000, the city went from being classified as a suburban jurisdiction to a metropolitan jurisdiction. And what that did is it bumped up the default density from 20 to 30, and now in order to count a site as lower income, it has to at least allow 30 units per acre. So that means it could allow for 20 to 30 units per acre, 30 being the high end, or it could allow, like some of your zones, 35 to 43, because that is above 30 units per acre. That can count as a lower income housing site. I do want to mention that as part of this housing element, the city is proposing to slightly increase the maximum density, or I should say city staff is proposing to slightly increase the maximum density in the R3 zone from 25 to 30 units per acre. And that would allow the city to count R3 zone sites in the lower income sites inventory. So right now, I think R3 allows 15 to 25. By bumping that up to 30, all of a sudden you would now be able to count all of those R3 sites in the lower income sites inventory. And that's one of the assumptions built into the sites inventory, so that would require council action prior to the start of the housing element. All right, so what's shown here is the sites inventory map that's in the draft housing element. We map all of the vacant or underutilized sites where new housing can be built in the 8-year planning period. And you can see that there are sites throughout the city. I'm going to highlight some of the key areas expected to accommodate the lower income RHNA. I mentioned already the assumption that R3 sites, the density would be bumped by 5 units per acre to be able to count those as lower income sites. The RHN overlay sites are sites where the city has placed a zoning overlay to allow multifamily density at 35 to 43 units per acre. And these sites were added to the inventory during the previous housing element cycle to meet the city's obligation for the 4th cycle RHNA. And we see cities around the state using that housing overlay approach to meet the lower income RHNA. So those sites are counted here, and I'll show the summary of capacity in just a minute on those sites and others. The Loma Vista specific plan area on the far east of the city limits is another area that's growing, and it has high density land, which can be counted towards the lower income RHNA. So I just wanted to point out there's a lot of capacity on the eastern edge of the city limits, and then a lot of capacity in the inventory on the northern edge of the city limits, where the city is working with landowners to annex land to accommodate some new growth. And there's a lot of opportunity in that northern area for higher density housing that can be inventoried as lower income sites. The inventory also assumes that the Willow Corridor portion of the Heritage Grove specific plan area will be annexed prior to the start of the housing element. So those are inventoried as available sites, assuming that annexation goes forward. But if it didn't, those would have to be classified slightly differently in the inventory.
Chelsea, can I ask a question? The two, so I guess, what is a pipeline project?
Yeah, I can. So pipeline projects are projects that have their entitlements. So they've been approved, and now all they have to do is come forward and pull building permits.
Okay, all right.
So
But interestingly, the areas that are identified, are those going back to the resource availability slide? Are they still in those high resource areas? Because is there a risk that you get too far east, for example, and today there's not a whole bunch of grocery stores, et cetera? I mean, are those sort of two countervailing perspectives?
We don't dig that deeply into the access to opportunity maps.
Okay.
We note that that's considered a highest
okay.
resource.
So there's not
area.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
There's a lot of new growth potential beyond what's shown here, but what we're trying to do is capture our best guess, our best estimate of what can move forward during the 8-year planning period of the housing element. So we know that there's other opportunity within the sphere of influence, but what we're really looking at are sites that are either going to be or likely to be annexed before the start of the planning period, before the end of this year, or very early in the planning period so that they could be built, pulling permits within the time frame of the housing element. So we have to put forward a really realistic map of where there's housing opportunity over the planning period. So this very detailed table is just a summary table of the very, very detailed tables that are in the site's inventory. And so this shows at a high level how we are inventorying all of these different areas from approved pipeline projects, the RHN overlay sites, by lower income sites, moderate income sites, and above moderate income sites. So the city's RHNA target is shown on the top line, and then the total capacity is shown towards the bottom. And based on the draft housing element, we're showing a surplus capacity for all income limits, with a surplus of 537 lower income units. And then you can see a larger surplus in the moderate and then even more in the above moderate income category. I want to just emphasize again, there is more housing capacity than what we get to inventory in the site's inventory. For example, the RHN overlay sites, there is quite a bit more capacity on those sites, but there are a lot of new requirements for the 6th cycle about how we inventory sites. So we took a fresh look at those sites, and we're putting forward very conservative development assumptions. That's really what's required of this exercise. So we inventory sites at minimum density. We have to look at things like likelihood that they'll develop with a certain type of housing. And those are all sort of a new lens that's really being emphasized by the state this time around. So this is a very conservative look at housing capacity in all of these areas. So I'm going to move on now and spend some time going through the housing plan, which is also a very important chapter of the housing element. This is chapter 2. And the housing plan is essentially the city's 8-year strategy for addressing housing needs. And it contains 3 overall goals: to accelerate housing production, preserve and improve the existing housing stock, and affirmatively further fair housing. There are 25 policies and 24 implementation programs that are organized around these 3 goals. The first goal, to accelerate housing production, is about providing an ample supply of housing to meet the existing and the projected housing needs for households at all income levels. I'm going to highlight just 5 of the implementation programs that are under this goal heading. The first program that I'm going to talk about is program H2. This is the No Net Loss program. This is a requirement of state law. It's been on the books for quite some time, but it's changed through legislation recently. What No Net Loss law says is that if development is approved on a site that's in your housing element inventory, with fewer units or at a different income level than what was assumed in the inventory, the city has to either make findings that the remaining sites have adequate capacity to accommodate your remaining lower or moderate income RHNA. And if you can't make those findings, then the city is required to identify and make available a replacement site within 180 days. And it used to be that you only had to account for sites based on the number of units that were built, but Senate Bill 166, I think it was passed in 2018, changed that. So now you have to account for the income level of the units that are built on the sites. So it's no longer just about the density of the housing approved, but the actual income limits of those units built. And so this puts a lot of pressure to create a big buffer of additional capacity, especially in your lower income inventory, because the city is required to maintain adequate sites throughout the entire planning period and track development activity. And so having a larger buffer of lower income sites can help you avoid a no net loss issue where you're having to find replacement sites.
Chelsea, you see that in, so a replacement adds an income item now, where initially it doesn't.
That's correct. Yeah, the law changed so that now you have to monitor development activity on your sites based on the actual income level of the units built. So if you have a site in your lower income inventory, and we inventory sites just based on density, but if a market rate multifamily unit is built instead of a deed restricted lower income development, then that site is essentially lost from the lower income inventory. And if you get to a point where so many of those lower income sites are lost from the inventory that you can no longer accommodate your remaining RHNA, you have to start finding replacement sites. And replacement sites might be, you know, oh, this other site, we became aware that there's opportunity on the site, it's already zoned appropriately, and it could be as easy as that, but often what it means is finding sites to rezone for higher density housing, to upzone to 30 units per acre.
Thank you.
Program H4 is about the city's affordable housing fee reduction program, and Lily mentioned some accomplishments under this program during the fifth cycle housing element. This program reduces impact fees for affordable housing developments. So the city has used this program in the past to support Butterfly Gardens. That was an example of a permanent supportive housing project that was supported through this program. But it requires finding funding to offset the fees. And the new version of this program has an affirmatively furthering fair housing lens, and it prioritizes funding for affordable housing in the highest resource areas and for developments that include permanent supportive housing. The objective is to fund 350 affordable units during the planning period.
I think the key line in there is find funding to make this so. Right, I think, I mean, to Diane, your point, I mean, the state used to, I mean, maybe there was a day where the state would have programs, or they still may, I'm not sure, but I mean, there's no, that's a gap. And I think Clovis has done a pretty good job of having all of our neighborhoods develop the same, with the same fees and sidewalks and, you know, and trying to get better in the older parts of town. But I mean, parks and all that, if that goes away, then what? It's just, that's the tension I see in this. Yes, this all makes sense, and someone has to pay for the infrastructure. So I think that's a challenge, but there are, I mean, I don't know, are there programs that would help us allow this fee reduction to happen?
So I can't recall the bill that passed it, but the state has established the Permanent Housing Local Assistance Fund. It's a formulaic allocation of funding to the city. It varies based on recording fees, so property transactions between $300,000 to $500,000 a year, and that's how we developed that 350 number. Was over 8 years. We think we would get enough of that PHLA to support those number of units. Obviously, that's not the full number that's called out for in the document, so additional funding would help meet those obligations.
You can use those funds to do infrastructure, parks, or whatever other water, sewer fees that are required by a building generally.
You can use those funds for a variety of things. One of those things is to support the development of multifamily projects that are deed restricted, which would include any kind of impact fees or infrastructure improvements.
Okay. Thanks, Chelsea.
All right, so the next program, H5, is about providing incentives and supporting grant applications for affordable housing and special needs housing, like housing for seniors, people with disabilities, people experiencing homelessness. Different incentives that the city offers are, you know, state density bonus, application streamlining, the fee reductions that we just talked about, and ministerial staff level approval of land divisions to support affordable housing. Those are some of the ideas for incentives. The objective is to support over 1,000 affordable units, including the breakdown that's shown here.
Can I ask a question? Looking at the bottom picture, Solvita Commons, that doesn't meet the 20-unit, now 30-unit requirement. So we assist, we waived some funds or used redevelopment funds. So we assist with that, but it doesn't count. Is that accurate?
Well, so the site in your sites inventory, if it didn't allow 30 units per acre, wouldn't be counted as a lower income site. But if affordable housing can be built on at less than 30 units per acre, that's an example.
But it doesn't count towards our low-income RHNA numbers.
It would count. It would get reported in your annual progress report towards the lower income inventory, and would essentially be added into your inventory. So at the point in which you issue the building permits for that, that gets added towards meeting your RHNA, so it essentially reduces the pressure on other sites. So from a no net loss perspective, you can be adding sites by approving affordable housing on sites that weren't in the lower income inventory. And then it gets essentially added to your RHNA or added to the sites inventory at that point. Does that make sense? So you would get credit at the point that a project like that
Where would the credit come?
So city staff will be tracking very closely development activity. And so say there's there's an R2 zone site that's in your moderate income inventory, but you get a proposal for affordable housing on that site. Well, now the city would get to move that into the lower income inventory and count those units for what actually got approved. So you would get credit. You just wouldn't at the front end when we do this exercise of the sites inventory. At this point, we only credit sites where 30 units per acre can be built.
So even when we cooperatively work with Fresno Housing Authority, build housing, we still are in violation of RHNA. Would that be inaccurate?
You would get credit for it at the point that it.
But we'd still be in violation, right? I mean, we're not meeting the requirement of the assembly bills, correct?
I'm not sure exactly that it would be considered violation of the RHNA. It would just
we're not in compliance, I guess.
New information.
We're not complying, even when we do that.
It's helpful in meeting the RHNA, but building one project.
I don't mean to paint you into a corner, but when helpful means pretty much nothing to people who want to beat us up for not having, well, that's helpful. That word doesn't mean much. And when we work closely with Butterfly Commons or with the Fresno Housing Authority, and I thought that was a great project, we're still not in compliance. And so I get lost in the words sometimes. You know, we have, well, that's helpful, but not compliant, and which is kind of what it comes down to, and at the end of the day for me. Thank you.
Yeah. So the next program, H6, is about supporting missing middle housing, and missing middle has become a popular buzzword to describe housing that's generally affordable to middle-income earners without requiring a subsidy, because it's generally smaller units, denser housing that's sort of affordable by design. So duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, small single-family, accessory dwelling units. These are all types, or the cottage housing units in Clovis. These are all types of sort of missing middle housing, and it's important in the context of the housing element because it can be a way to fit more affordable housing types into existing single-family neighborhoods. So there are a lot of different aspects to this program. State law has Senate Bill 9, which requires the city to allow ministerial lot splits and duplexes in single-family zones. So this program looks at doing a review of development standards to make sure that you're removing any barriers to those that type of housing from happening. It allows accessory dwelling units in all residential and mixed-use zones consistent with state law. Make sure that staff is reviewing and keeping the ADU ordinance in compliance with state law. And then there are aspects around advertising the opportunities for building this type of housing, like advertising the free streamlined cottage home plans that the city has. There are also some pre-approved ADU plans that have been created at the regional level. So it's about getting the word out about this opportunity.
Chelsea, can I ask a question of staff? Renee, on all these that require a look at our internal policies and procedures, when will that occur? Will you have a committee that will start looking at our processes to see if ministerially here are potential roadblocks but when will that occur? And can you kind of speak to that? Because I know that there's several recommendations made in which we have to look at our codes and our policies.
Yes, so I just spoke with Dave. All of the programs have timelines established with them as to when we need to have that reviewed. There is a group of city staff. We work closely with Chad McComb's group on the housing and planning staff to look at each of those programs. We've been doing it every year. We also need to evaluate as part of our annual reporting how we're meeting the current programs, and we'll do the same thing carrying into the sixth cycle.
And those will have to come before us because they may require code changes or not really, it doesn't have to?
So anything that does require a code change, we will be bringing back. So for example, Chelsea mentioned the increase in the density. So that will come back before council. That will be in the form of a general plan amendment. So before December of the end of this calendar year, we'll be bringing that back in front of you for consideration to increase that particular density range.
Okay. Thank you, Renee.
And I'll just mention on that point, you won't see that density increase in the R3 zone reflected in the programs because staff is planning to bring that forward for your consideration before the start of this planning period. So it's more of a footnote in the housing element. If that action is not taken, then we would revise the sites inventory to not reflect that. So the last program in goal section 1 that I'm going to highlight is program H8. And this is related to what you were just talking about, which is updating the city's zoning code to remove barriers to housing development. So we have to do a very thorough assessment of potential constraints. And this program specifically calls for reducing parking standards for multifamily housing, which are a bit higher in Clovis than in other places. Considering reductions in the minimum street width for residential subdivisions, this was a topic that came out of the stakeholder interviews and something that staff has included to look into more. And increasing the building heights slightly in the R2 and R3 zones to better match different multifamily product types that are generally built in those zones. The initial update to the zoning code is planned for June 2025. And then I understand the city may be initiating a general plan update, and the program calls for updating the zoning code after the general plan for consistency between the zoning and the general plan, and we have 2027 as a target year for that. Goal 2 is about preserving and improving the existing housing stock, and I'm going to touch on just 2 programs in this section. The first is program H10. The city has an existing mobile home rent review and stabilization ordinance that's been in the regulations since, I believe, 1978 and amended over the years. And this ordinance places restrictions on the amount that mobile home park owners can increase rents. We heard from local stakeholders and advocates that there was a need for more monitoring of the ordinance and more outreach to mobile home park residents. So this program was added in response to those comments. The objective is to conserve all of the existing mobile home parks as a source of affordable housing in the city. And then program H12 describes the city's home rehabilitation loan and grant program, which we've talked about in the last item. This provides loans to lower income owners to make health and safety repairs. This is particularly helpful for low-income seniors and mobile home park owners. And the objective for the next planning period is to assist 250 households. And then the last goal, goal number 3, is to foster an inclusive community and remove barriers to housing for vulnerable populations, including special needs populations and people experiencing homelessness. There are a lot of programs under this goal section, but I'm going to focus on 4 of those programs. So the first one, program H16, is about housing choice vouchers. And Housing Choice Vouchers is a program that's run by the Fresno Housing Authority to give vouchers to lower income households to cover a portion of rent for market rate units. And state law requires landlords to accept Housing Choice Vouchers, but there's still some information out there about the program, and we didn't hear this specifically in Clovis, but we've heard around the state that some landlords refuse to rent to residents with vouchers. So this program is about focused on working with the Housing Authority on educating landlords and encouraging participation in the voucher program with a goal of increasing usage by 10 households in the highest resource neighborhoods in Clovis. The next program is around actions to address homelessness, which is required of the housing element as well. The homeless point-in-time count estimates that there are about 50 people experiencing homelessness in Clovis. And we've been seeing rates of homelessness increase across the state as housing prices have increased. This program is about working regionally to prevent people from becoming homeless, exploring strategies to increase employment opportunities for those at risk of homelessness, and providing adequate housing and additional shelter, and supporting and improving the existing women's shelter. The next program, Neighborhood Revitalization. This program is essentially part of the Fair Housing Strategy to prioritize capital improvements in the areas of greatest need, including areas where there are higher concentrations of lower income residents and more limited access to existing resources and amenities. So this program would give highest priority for projects that advance economic mobility opportunities, prevent displacement, and improve transportation and connectivity in the let's say relatively lower resource areas, although all of Clovis is high or highest resource. And then the very last program that I'm going to cover is program H24, and this is essentially a laundry list of zoning code amendments that are needed to bring the city's municipal code into compliance with state law. As you know, the legislature is constantly passing new state laws related to housing, and specifically related to housing for those experiencing homelessness and other special needs groups. And so this is mostly changes to the zoning code in terms of where emergency homeless shelters are allowed, allowing low barrier navigation centers, which is a type of homeless shelters, by right in mixed use zones, allowing emergency shelters.
I'm sorry, could you define low barrier navigation center?
Yeah, it's a pretty wonky term.
Yeah.
It's a type of homeless shelter that has a lower barrier for entry. So it has fewer restrictions on who can stay there the night. So maybe someone that has pets, it allows pets, it allows partners. So it's lower barrier to finding a place to sleep, and also is usually coupled with services to help get people back into permanent housing. So it's a very specific type of homeless shelter.
This is also mean like you could be an active drug user, you don't have to refrain from drinking. Some of those things I think in some cities are considered, those are barriers to homeless shelters, so I think it can include those sorts of things.
It could be as well, yes.
So this is kind of an entry-level homeless shelter. You can come as you are, no questions asked, here's a place to sleep, and here's some information about drug abuse.
With lots, like very service enriched as well, to help those with those issues to get into more stable housing. So there are quite a few things on this list, and these are all related to compliance with state law. State law requires that you permit group homes in all residential zones, so this is related to what was being discussed earlier and will be discussed on Wednesday. There's also modifying procedures for providing reasonable accommodations, and this is a process for people with disabilities to request an exception to your rules to accommodate their disability. And so there are a lot of requirements here, and we can go into those in Q&A, but this is all about coming into compliance with state law. I'm not an attorney, but I would say even if it's not in your zoning code, if it's written into state law and the action is in violation of state law, then likely yes. But I'm just a housing planner. I'm not an attorney.
I know some of this is unfair.
Chelsea,
yeah.
You know, all these programs that are listed, I'm trying to make it fit in the city, build homes. Yeah, you have all these things that don't build homes. So we only have a set number of dollars. So if you set it into all these programs, you know, make bilingual stuff, do all these things, where's the dollars going to where we put it into where we're actually building the units? Because we can do all these well, build zero, we're non-compliant. So no, I see, H24, there's so many of them. Are these mandated by the state for us to have, or are these something in which you, working with us, saying these are programs we should have? So I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot. Like, what is required of us? Like, what do we absolutely have to do? And there is no clear answer to that. So there are some basic requirements for compliance, like this list here, but then there's a lot of judgment by HCD and the reviewers on whether or not the whole body of programs are enough to move the ball in the direction that they're looking for. So there are, there's not a bright line of what's going to be required, and you'll see that as we get into the HCD review process. That we've done our very best to put forward what we feel like are strong programs with firm commitments and timelines, addressing the issues that we see coming up in the state's letters. But I can tell you they will have comments on these programs, and there will be more that they want to see, because that is part of the process.
But in your expertise in looking at other jurisdictions, these programs have led to increases in better home ownership and helping us provide more housing units. If there's no equivalency, I just want data to back up each program as well. If it's being recommended and going, hey, this program will help here, instead of us having to allocate resources all over the place and yet not just put it into, here, this will help 500 units right away instead of distributing it all over.
Yeah, I understand that, and I think it's, we've done our best to comply with what's required in state law and touch on all of the aspects of making it easier to build housing, removing barriers, supporting home ownership, housing rehabilitation, promoting fair housing. So there are a lot of different obligations coming down from the state, and we're trying to put forward the best plan for Clovis that meets those requirements. And city staff has worked closely on it, your housing staff, looking at resources that the city has, also opportunities to go after new funding, and we've tried to put forward the best plan that we think is feasible, that achieves all of the things that the state is looking for.
like the one on the mobile home, I thought a better recommendation would be build a couple more mobile home parks instead of just, hey, monitor it better. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't give us any extra units. It helps with displacement potentially, but there's no recommendation in going, why don't you build 3 more? Because you have good ones here in town. You know, people may want to move into it. So, you know, those I would say very practical. That can get us another 400 units. But I don't see it, and so that's why I look at it and I go, I struggle with the programs and equal more units. So.
Yeah. So those are all the programs that I'm going to highlight. Happy to answer questions about any of the others. I do want to touch on, before we wrap up, just the consequences of noncompliance, because I get asked this question a lot, like, what happens if we don't adopt this? What happens if we don't get certified by the state? And so one of the things would be the city would be ineligible for a lot of the state funding programs, many of which support housing, like housing rehab programs, but also other infrastructure and transportation-related grants. The housing element is part of the general plan, so if the housing element isn't adopted and certified, the general plan could be found inadequate, which would leave the city open to litigation, which can lead to, you know, paying attorney fees, has in other cities led to loss of permitting authority by the local government. And then lastly, I'll just touch on the builder's remedy. This is a component of the Housing Accountability Act. It's been on the books for about 30 years, but it's gotten a lot of headlines recently in Southern California and a little bit in the Bay Area. So for jurisdictions that don't adopt their housing element on time and find it in substantial compliance with state law, developers that provide certain types of residential developments, like developments with 20% of lower income or 100% moderate or middle income, could come forward with projects that are inconsistent with the city's zoning, and the city would not be able to deny, it's very difficult to deny those projects. So for example, development in the headlines that we were seeing were in Santa Monica, like a 15-story residential development coming forward in a zone where that was not permitted, or residential being proposed on a site that was supposed to be planned for a school or for a commercial shopping center or so on. So just something to pay attention to. We're going to try to get into compliance by the deadline to avoid a situation like that in Clovis.
Oh, we're going to get into compliance by the deadline. We're not going to try. No trying. No trying. Chelsea, a question on the one comment about allowing emergency shelters by right in any residential zone district is slightly alarming. But does the capacity of that shelter, so say it's 100 individuals, does that number count towards something? Or this is sort of additional shelter options that don't count toward these RHNA numbers in any case?
Oh, that's a good question. They would not count towards the RHNA numbers because an emergency shelter, those are not considered residential units. And so they wouldn't count towards your RHNA numbers. So this is an additional requirement, right? The housing element a lot of it is about the RHNA numbers, but there are a lot of other requirements.
But you can't count those 100 beds as shelter for very low income.
No, you cannot. Permanent supportive housing, yes.
Yes.
That's a housing unit, but an emergency shelter bed is not considered a housing unit. Yeah, that's a good question. What the law says is that you have to have at least one zoning district where you permit emergency shelters by right without a use permit or without any discretionary action. So one zoning district. And the law recently changed with AB, I'm drawing a blank right now. The law recently changed to say that that zoning district has to be a zone where other residential uses are allowed.
So you can't put an industrial park or
Correct.
something. That's the point of that.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
I think we already touched on next steps at the beginning, but essentially at the end of the 30-day review period, we will submit the housing element. We'll take into account any public comments we receive, and if we are revising the housing element, we'll publish a revised draft, and then we'll submit that to the state for their review. They have 90 days for that first review. We'll get a comment letter, we'll revise, publish online again, notify the public of the revised draft, and work with HCD through hopefully no more than 2 rounds. It's been taking 2 to 3 rounds for most cities to get through the process, but everyone's getting a little better at this as we go along. And then we're aiming to bring that forward by the end of the year for adoption. So every subsequent draft that we produce going forward will show all of the changes and track changes to be completely transparent with what's changed. You might start seeing yellow highlighting for this set of revisions and so on, but we're going to be tracking and publishing and making that all very transparent.
Then I have a question.
Yes.
Chelsea, during the HCD review process, is there an opportunity for the public to comment to HCD, or are they, because I'm assuming these are appointed people and nobody's elected over there?
No one is elected. These are all staff level.
Right. So they're appointed staff and employees.
Employees, yeah.
And what is the opportunity for members of the public to address them? Is there?
They are open and available for members of the public to contact them. In
Sacramento? Not locally. They would not appear locally to have conversation?
Probably not. Phone call, email, or meeting in Sacramento. They have been known to come down here, but so it's very frequent for advocates to contact HCD and have meetings about the housing element, and then HCD takes those comments into consideration. Also, any comment letters received on the housing element, HCD takes those into consideration, and you often see those comments appearing in the comment letters you receive from the state.
Advocates generally come from groups that are advocating, obviously, different things, but how does the public, other than sending an email to a faceless bureaucrat, how does their voice get heard?
Faceless
bureaucrat. Is there a way to do that?
Through our process. So if the public wants to comment on this housing element to city staff, we'll collect all public comments. We will include that in an appendix, be part of the record for the housing element. I don't know that HCD reads all of the comments from the public, but it would be part of our submittal to the state. I suppose we could also put on the website a way to contact HCD. We can think about how to make that available to the public as well.
Well, I think it would be important because you have people who, if they have a concern about something specific, they can bring it to us, but they also need to bring it to HCD because they are a government agency that's supposed to be responsive to the citizens.
Yeah, we can make that available.
That's great. Thank you.
Anything else for consultants? Planning Commission, you're so quiet. I'd like to welcome you to the end of local planning commission to what I think is happening here in California. That's just my opinion here, but any questions from you all to our consultants, our team? No? Huh?
Lily?
Disturbing? Yeah, I think what's so exasperating is the rules are fine. There's no variation. There's no room for cities to enact what they think works for them. I guess that's what's sort of California thinks every size fits everybody, and it just does not. But this sort of document, I think the elements are all fine, good. I mean, should go in that direction, but there's just no ability for cities to say, hey, our needs are a little bit more here than there. But I don't know, that is what's so hard about this document. But anyway, any other comments or questions?
I had a question with regards to the next steps. Is it wrong in the paragraph in our report, Lily, where after the 120 90-day grace period. It says March 31, 2023. Should it be 24? Oh, so it is extension after the 31st of this year. Okay, I just want to clear. You know, I wanted to say, Chelsea, I think you're the perfect person to present this and to help our staff because you're patient and it's very complicated and you explain things very well. And I would like to say this to our staff. I see it as a challenge in which Clovis can meet. I look at those charts. We have areas ready to develop these type of housings that are required. We have communities that are ready. So the two maps that the mayor and I looked at, it just shows there it is. We have it. And I think the challenge now is to Renee and your staff to go, all right, we'll do it. Here are these 9,000 homes and whatever is required. We can plot it all down. And here are these programs in which we will take the lead and be sort of the example to the rest of the county, if not the state, on how to help remedy the situations and to create products. When this first came up, it took our planning staff to create the cottage homes, which no one did. You see, that's sort of what Clovis does. And I think, Renee, you have the staff ready, and I think you will have us, as little as we understand it, to give you an offer the support for us to be able to meet these numbers for the next 8 years. And so that way we can really fulfill it. This is a very detailed, excellent report. I think I don't remember when the last time it was presented. This is so detailed and a lot of charts and graphs that I think are very helpful to us to understand and to the public. So thank you for your work.
Can I?
Yeah.
Again, Chelsea, great presentation. It was everything Vaughn said. It was put together well. I think that we can do this. I think we, as a community, can accomplish this. The conversation we had last week about, I think it was Laguna Hills Mall, is changing and becoming housing. I think as we see commercial trends evolve, I think that we'll be able to dedicate some housing in our commercial areas, which I think would be a win-win for businesses, for people living on the Shaw Corridor. They can work and live in the same community, have affordable housing. The only issue that I see out here is the unfunded mandates from the state, and they're going to, it seems like all we're seeing is the stick and no carrot, which is, I think, unfair. But I think we can accomplish this.
Okay.
I also want to just echo those sentiments of the impressiveness of the report. I mean, taking incredibly tedious information and putting it together in a way that can actually be absorbed and even potentially comprehended is quite a feat. And so I just want to thank you so much for all of the effort, for everyone that participated in that. That, like I say, I can't even imagine if you had to calculate the hours and the energy, blood, sweat, and tears that went into that. And I also really appreciate kind of the can-do spirit from my colleagues as well as staff and everyone as we look at these things. I feel a little bit like my job is to acknowledge that, appreciate that, but also say I'm sorry that you even have to do that. Because what I see in this, it kind of reminds me of the conversation we had a number of weeks ago with the electrification of transit, where I feel like there's all of this stuff that we as a municipality, as a city, are supposed to do, but there's not really a recognition of the lack of resources to accomplish it in the manner in which it's intended. And so I feel like here we sit up here as elected officials to represent what we're supposed to do is represent what we believe is the best interest of this community. And what unfortunately I hear so much as we go through these programs and as we hear about these regulations and things is that we're not even allowed
to consider that anymore. All we have to do is look at what the state is telling us we're required to do and sign off on it. And I feel like that puts me in a very uncomfortable position of how am I supposed to go back to these people that I told I wanted to be their voice. I wanted to bring their concerns forward and make sure that this community continued in a path that really had everyone together and in our own best interest. And again, I mean, Mayor Ashbeck just alluded to the concept of eliminating more local control in terms of planning commissions. And it's just very frustrating. So as much as I appreciate all of the work and the effort and everything that goes into it, I just get a little frustrated at the same time. And my other concern also, again, kind of with the electrification concept, let's just say that we built every single unit that we discussed that's in this element. What happens when the governor tells those people that they don't get to turn their lights on, they don't get to run their washing machine, they don't get to have their refrigerator going all the time? Because the rest of the state, I feel like we live in a state where the right hand doesn't know and frankly doesn't care what the left hand is doing, because we have this housing issue and we want to build all of this housing, but we can't support it with our electric grid. We can't even support it with water. Are we going to actually build water stores so we can service these people? Are we going to be able to bring services? We have a city right now where we have staffing issues in police and fire and first responders, and yet we're talking about trying to meet all of these needs, but we're not even recognizing a majority of the resources that are required to do that in a way that meets the best interests of our community. So I know that's semi-irrelevant to the specifics, but it's just kind of that broader picture of how are we truly supposed to tackle some of these issues when I feel like what they're asking for us on one hand, they're also preventing us from delivering on the other hand.
Thank you. Planning commissioners, any comments? Amy?
Just a couple. You did a really good job. I loved all your presentation, really down to the nitty-gritty. The one thing that I see from being up here so long is that we can show on a map where we can build these things, but the problem is nobody will build them. Nobody will come in and build this. We're never going to get low density because nobody will come in. They can't afford to build it. We don't have anything, for the most part, other than market rate, and that's a situation that the general public doesn't know. And so every time somebody does want to come in and build something that is market rate, we get backlash of, oh, I don't want an apartment complex in my neighborhood because I only want a single-family home on a 9,000 square foot lot. And so I think the public, and it's not necessarily our job, but somebody needs to inform the public of what the state is mandating all of us, because we get hit with it every month, you guys get hit with it every week. Here, this is what we have to do, and this is why we have to do it. Just like tonight, Wednesday, when you get to tell them that by right that house can be there, look where that's going to go. So I don't think the general public knows what we have to do and what's required of us. So I think there needs to be some more thought put into how can we get the public to know what the laws are, and don't think, oh, it's just the planning commission, oh, it's just city council, oh, we only want high-income Caucasian neighbors. That's not what we want. Unfortunately, for right now, that's what's getting built, and those are the people that may live here. But we really need to work at how do we get people to build those properties. Because we can put it on a map every day come Sunday, but if nobody builds it, it doesn't really get us anywhere.
Well, and I think the example from a few weeks ago, the headline was Clovis denies apartment complex. They were $2,800 a month. So
more than my mortgage.
Exactly. So there's something that, the story, the narrative is easier to say we don't want apartments, but that's simply a false narrative. But so it made it look like we didn't want apartments. Well, that wasn't going to help our affordable housing inventory at all at $20 a month. That's more than all of our mortgages. So anyway, it is a narrative, but I don't disagree. One of my points is our staff reports are going to have to start having to have education for the public. Like this is the legislation that's causing this action in front of us, because I don't think people, and nor should they understand. You're a full-time urban planner, and it's a lot to keep track of. And if you're not a full-time urban planner, so I do think, we'll spend more time here talking about legislation that affects our housing and everything, because I do think that's a playing field. We're not saying it's a reason not to do it. It's just saying it's harder, and we'll do it. We will do it better than anyone, but it's harder for sure. So I don't disagree with you. Brendan, anything? Comments?
Yeah, I have one question. Well, first I'll say, this was very impressive from my perspective as well. I've been a sponge trying to soak all this up and.
Makes healthcare look easy, huh?
Yeah, maybe not, but.
Okay, close. Kind of easier.
Easier. The one thing that you made a comment at the beginning about the slate being wiped clean. So we know that we have to plan for all of this. We have to make it available. We just discussed that if no one builds it, they don't build it. But when we talk about the consequences or whatever the punitive aspects are, if we don't meet these numbers, what are the implications? I mean, as long as it's on paper, as long as it's there, as long as we conform to these programs that align to the various goals that are mandated of us, if we build one, none, or the entire allotment, we're okay from a municipality standpoint?
That's correct. As long as you're complying with state law and not denying housing that you shouldn't be denying,
sure,
then that's correct. The obligation is to maintain an inventory of sites to accommodate your RHNA and to implement the programs in the housing element, and you report on that each year. But it takes private developers to come forward and want to build that housing, and for those projects to get to compete for limited state funding and to get built. So that a lot of that is outside the city's control. So there really aren't any penalties for not meeting the RHNA in terms of units built. But again, there are a lot of other state laws that you have to comply with and not deny those affordable projects as they do come forward.
Yeah, and that was my understanding, but I just want to clarify that. Like some other council members have commented, I mean, I have high confidence that Clovis can rise to the occasion. We have great city planning staff to do that. You know, we've had experience with displacing some of these RHNA numbers and having to find other areas to rezone or bring an overlay into. So anyway, my confidence is high that we can do this and be a best practice location here for the state.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Mike?
I agree with what my other commissioners have said. Thank you for your presentation. It overwhelms an old mind like mine, but I'm struggling. I won't have to struggle much longer anyhow. I'd like to expand upon what Amy just said. You know, we can do all this and go through all these exercises, and that's what they are, they're exercises. We can expend a lot of staff time, create these new opportunities on the one hand, but on the other hand, unless we have a developer that's willing to work with us or come in, then it's really all for naught, in my view. I mean, we can sit back and say, we try to comply, or we did comply with the state law, so we're no harm, no foul. I was around when we went through the fourth cycle, and we were told, you know, all we have to do is zone public, create the public, I forget what the zoning was. That's all we had to do, and the developers, if they build on it, that's great, and if they don't, we're still okay. Well, now we're on to the next cycle, and we've added several more requirements, and it all comes down to, you know, unless you have someone willing to build, or in the, I know we're very proud, and I am too, of the Butterfly Commons, and I think that's a wonderful project. But the reality is it was heavily subsidized by government, heavily subsidized, and the figure I heard is there was 75 units, and there was still $500,000 per unit. $500,000 per unit, and that's affordable housing? I thoroughly endorse what my commissioners have said about we have to give the word out to our public Every month, when we have a controversial item, the last one was that 12-unit apartment complex, the people, good people around, they just couldn't understand where all this sudden law is coming from. They just couldn't understand, couldn't grasp it, and that's our fault for not putting it out. We need to educate on where this is coming from. It isn't coming from us here. It's not coming from you. It's coming from somewhere else, and we've got to have the electorate be made aware of this in layman's terms. I wish you all success.
We'll talk about that later. Alma.
Thank you. I think the thing that definitely I'm very impressed with your presentation, and it was very easy to follow, so I appreciate it. I think what impressed me the most was our map, that we have services that we were like the dark blue and the darker blue. That means that that's because the amazing leadership that has been in this city for many, many, many years, and understanding what the needs of our community are. And it was developed such that it kept everything, every detail in mind, from our planning department to our council to commissioners before myself and the ones who sit here currently, understanding what our city needed. And it's a little disheartening, I think, to have that element removed as far as being able to make a decision of whether certain developments or certain projects will work or what works for our city. Now, I'm going to echo a little bit of what Councilman Pierce said is, where's the money coming from? Do you know what I mean? We need to implement all these things, but where are the resources coming from? I do believe, you know, we have a spirit of excellence here in this community. I moved here over 20 years ago for two things: schools and safety. And I've lived here feeling very safe, and my children went to Clovis schools and graduated and moved on, and they're doing amazing. And this is a beautiful community to raise children. And it's just, I support it 100% that we need to have variety in our housing development. And it's interesting that we only counted Caucasian, because there's plenty of Latinos and any other race here who are very successful. And I saw my area there, and I can see that, okay, you know, we're successful as well, and we're part of this community, and we have been, so we should be counted as well. It's just, I just wish that Sacramento allowed us to make decisions that worked for our city. I have no doubt that we can rise to the occasion. We have great leadership, and all is welcomed here, everyone. I mean, I've been saying it since I sat on this dais that the city welcomes whoever you are, regardless of your race or your background, and because I think it allows us to be we're like this beautiful quilt knitted together of all kinds of different shades and sizes, and it makes for such a rich community. So I read the papers too and the headlines, and because the city is successful doesn't mean that some are brought in and others are kept out. I really do believe that we have more of an open arms type of city. I mean, you can see it in a lot of the things that we do here, and I think that's my only concern, is that we just aren't allowed to continue to make decisions. It's worked for our city. That's why we're so successful. That's why, like you mentioned, we're one of the few cities that have services throughout. We can put anything anywhere and they can access, except maybe almost at the east side, like said. But people can go to a grocery store or do anything and be able to access services. So I know that there are some things that we don't have a choice in, but I completely support everything that my fellow commissioners have cited, that we too need to educate our public. I mean, I'll have conversations with various people, and they'll be completely oblivious to what's happening, but don't like what's happening. Like something's happening in their neighborhood, and now they're upset. They know I'm a commissioner, so they'll come and talk to me about it. But I'll have to say, oh, yeah, look here, this is what's, this is what's happening by right. We don't really have a say in that. And I don't know what the mechanism is to inform the public, but we need to be heard as well as a citizen. You have all these advocate groups, and I support them. It's great. But who advocates for just a regular, everyday citizen? I think that's lacking.
Thanks, Selma. Paul?
Thank you very much for putting that before us. I've seen this coming down. I've attended many planning meetings here in the Valley and stuff throughout the state, and I've seen it trickling down. It's only going to get worse. Planning Commission, we probably have 4 years left as an organization under what we are right now, the way we operate. We may be here, but under a different type of mode. But things are changing. Sacramento really doesn't care about the cities. They want it the way they want it to be on it. Until we do something about changing Sacramento, we have to learn how to make the city of Clovis work with what they have right now on the agenda so that we can move on with what we have done in the way of life we have put in front of our people forever. And all we can do is let's all team up with them. You're only as good as your team, and we have to be a team, and we have to work and do what we can to meet everything that's put in front of us right now until we can change things and make those changes come down through it. But we have to adapt to what's coming down the pipeline in front of us. And you guys have been doing a good job. Planning Commission has been very good, what they've done the last few years. I hate to see Mike leave. He's been a very big part in the commission on it. But I'm not surprised with what you've brought up in front of us. I've seen a lot of this. I've been introduced to it. In fact, I don't know, Renee has some information from one of the last meetings. If any of you are interested in it, maybe you could send it to them. But it's an outline of everything that was put in front of us at our meeting on it. It's very, very interesting. So you may have, email her and have her send it over to you. So, okay.
All right, thanks. Any other comments? I had 3 comments about the plan itself, like specifically. I totally agree with Fong on the mobile home parks and maybe more broadly senior housing complexes, because I think we talked about that a few meetings ago. We don't have many sort of neighborhood, not just projects, but maybe even broader than that. So I think we could do a better job, and that's a category of housing that I think our community, some of us are getting older, just saying. So that might be helpful. But mobile home parks, I think we do have really wonderful parks in the city, and that's something I don't think I've seen a new mobile home project in the 35 years I've done this, so I'm not sure, but I think that's an opportunity, I think.
There's a reason for no mobile home parks. A friend of mine owned 20% of the mobile home parks in California. Because of all the regulations and laws put in front of them, everybody got out of it.
Yeah, well,
and
there's
so
that, but maybe there's
it's something that it has to be really investigated and make it worthwhile for them to invest in a mobile home park. That's why no one's beating on the doors to put those in right now.
No, I'm sure.
I mean, we have places they would go, but they're not going to do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fair, but I think it's worth thinking about, and senior neighborhoods, I think, as well. The second thing I think that you said that was super important is our obligation to look at the cumulative impact of changes to RENA, and I think I've talked about this over the last decade, but when we change, when we give up RENA space, we need to have that like as the headline on the staff report so that we make sure we account for them somewhere else. I just think we can't overlook that, and I know staff monitors that, but I think the visual of that is really important for us. I think the section on housing rehab is also super important, so I don't know if because I think some of our housing stock that is in need of rehab would be qualified as low income, so I think the housing rehab element I think is also an important feature that I'd like to see just a little more attention. And the only mention I saw on health was in the housing rehab section, and I'm surprised the state, I shouldn't give them any more ideas, but there's such a correlation between housing and health, and I'm surprised that that's not in the housing element more. So I think as we do our general plan, I think we could be ahead of that curve at addressing the health impacts of adequate housing, because I think that the fact that it's not in here it'll probably be in the 7th cycle or whatever this one is. So, but I think just that attention to the health aspect of housing is probably also something we could think a little bit more about. So I think with all of that, we will conclude all of this to our Planning Commission friends. Thank you. Now, No, I'm just kidding. Is there anybody in the audience want to comment on this? I'm kidding. I didn't mean to say no. Did I? Thank you. Excellent. Briefest public comment around. Yeah, you have to come up here. Thank you, I'll take, but if anything more than does he have to go up here? Thank you.
Just on the health aspect, the state, the way they break it down on the policy committees, that's considered part of the community service policy committee, so there's a lot of bleed over on that. I'm just on that policy committee for the League of Cities, so we just had a 4-hour meeting on it last week. So they do talk about it a lot, and there was the specific questions that, as part of League of Cities, that we are taking back to the legislators is, you know, the local municipality role, the county role, and the state role, and how that is going to be a symbiotic relationship without the cities essentially losing local control. But there are a variety of bills that are covering that, and one of the main questions was, well, if we say yes on certain bills, is it going to dictate with RENA numbers and how that's going to affect? So the conversations are there, but it's kind of good that it is in the community service realm.
Not for long. Thank you, Des, for those additional comments. Anyone else, Paul?
I wanted to also say, I don't know if you guys saw the report that came out Monday, came out, I think, Friday last week. There are more business management people moving to Clovis than anywhere else in California.
Well, we need business management, so that's good. Good for us. I did not see that, no. All right, everybody. Oh, I'm sorry, please. And would you state your name again, since it's been several hours since you stated it the first time?
Yes, my name is Brent Burdine. I came here just to really speak about the event next week, and I stayed for the whole thing.
We do this 3 Mondays every month. You're welcome to come every time.
But I was really kind of surprised what I heard this evening, and I've lived in Clovis most of my life. I graduated from Clovis High in 1980 and married my wife here too. And I've heard many actually disturbing elements that I'm very concerned about. And that as you move forward, I would ask the 5 of you to consider that as you try to implement the plan, you can see how Clovis has been successful, and it's created good communities, and it's created a great city. And that you're trying to implement basically the mandates from Sacramento. Don't destroy our communities. Don't, in the rush to adhere to what the governor wants, break our communities, destroy the city. The 5 of you were elected to represent the citizens of Clovis, the city of Clovis. So, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Turn your Mic on, please. Thank you to our interpreter for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Sorry, Doris, go ahead.
Okay. Doris Semi with Granville Homes. Your hands are tied. You have to follow what state regulations require you to do in terms of density. It's really unfortunate because there's so much land around us. And I can tell you by building in downtown Fresno, North Clovis, and other parts of the community, most folks want biggest lot they can afford. If you had substantial more supply, price will level off. We have a lot more affordable homes for our average citizens. But that's not where the state is going, and I know you have to follow state regs. I really appreciate your comments, Council President Ashbeck, about healthy communities. By the way, all of our apartment complexes have a veggie garden all throughout, and I appreciate Councilwoman Pierce's comments about they have all these restrictions, but they're not going to pay. We have to figure out how to solve this puzzle for the state. One specific item of request, as you're looking at building standards, some of the items that was on the presentation tonight, street widths, parking requirements, et cetera, my guess is everything is becoming smaller. Less parking ratio, probably narrower streets. We want to probably balance that with, if we can, and I know you may not be able to, how people in Clovis actually live. What is the parking ratio that actually works where this council and staff doesn't get complaints from neighbors that go, I can't park my car someplace. So just please consider that as you're going through the building standards for your communities, for our communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Doris. It'll take all of us together to make that happen, that is for sure. Anyone else? All right, Chelsea, unanimously in agreement. You did a great job. Thank you so much, even with the bronchitis recovery. So thank you for being here. You probably have it again because you've talked for the last couple of hours. But thank you so much. It was really well done, methodical, clear. And I think we all are committed to preserving the Clovis we love. Like, that's why we're here. We didn't sign up for anything else but that. So we'll just have to work harder to make sure our values line up with the requirements, and we can do it. And I think what I say often is we're trying to build a community for 50 years from now, and that's our challenge. So smaller streets and narrower this and all of that is maybe okay for the moment, but I at least feel my obligation is 50 years from now, I'll be long gone, but it's got to be as good as what I get to enjoy today. And that, to me, is the magic formula of Clovis. So that's really our job. And we have staff and consultants and others that will help us get there. So anyway, thank you all very much for that conversation. So we're going to adjourn again and not get up. Back to the Clovis City Council meeting, where we will, oh, wait. Oh, yeah, did you guys have any other comments? I did it out of order. I already adjourned. Goodbye. City manager comments.
Thank you, Mayor. I've just got one item this evening, and
oh, nice.
I have two items this evening. Last Wednesday, we went to a luncheon, and Andy was awarded an award for the Dr. Lori Bennett Leadership Award, and it was a big deal. And a majority of it was from the work that he did during the pandemic, and he represented us well. The event was going long where everybody was doing 10 or 15-minute presentations. Andy got up there and did probably a 45-second presentation and brought us home on time. So thank you. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to bring up was going to be that over the past couple of weeks, we've had a pretty significant dialogue going back and forth with the public comment on the allowance of backyard chickens. So I never received clear direction on what we wanted to do with that public comment. So what I'd be looking for from City Council is going to be a consensus to either add it to the agenda at a future date or to not add it to agenda. So I wanted to put that back on your plate just to provide staff direction on what you want to do with the requests that are out there.
And I want to comment that was my request, because I don't feel like as this mayor role doesn't allow you that sort of like, no, I don't want to talk about that, but I want to talk about that. So thank you for the offer to return it to me, but I said, no, I'm going to return it to all of us that we're collectively in this. So I think we are looking for direction on, do we want to put this on the agenda or not? So I'm going to ask each of you directly whether we want to put it on or not, and then we can decide how to move forward. So, Diane. Let's go the other way. Matt, would you like to have this as an agenda item to allow backyard chickens?
Yes.
Okay, Vong?
Yep, out of respect for what we did last time at the last council, we continued it without having a formal hearing because of COVID. So because of that, I feel we owe the citizens to formally bring it forward to get an official vote from us. So yes.
Drew?
No.
Diane?
It's actually Vong's comments there that I was kind of looking for, and I didn't want to start because I wasn't 100% sure where things had officially been left. And so I agree with the way Vong framed it, and I think we owe the citizens a full hearing on it, so yes.
And I am absolutely over my dead body. No, I think it is a terrible idea. But 3-2, we will bring it back. And I want it to be clear that staff recommendation is not going to be to allow backyard chickens. I think as staff has already indicated. So I don't think there's anything that has changed. I think we did hear it. We heard it in 20, and we continued it to 21. And we talked about it again in 21, and the council, I think.
So if I could just clarify, we did both, in that,
yeah.
It was introduced in 2020, we came back, in mid-2020, in June of 2020, and the answer was, let's continue this for a year and come back.
Right.
Former Councilmember Whalen was the one that put the initial request out there. So we, not officially came back a year later, but approximately a year later, he rescinded his request to add it to the agenda, primarily because of the legal suit that was taking place in the city of Bakersfield, where the city of Bakersfield was being sued for allowing backyard chickens because they didn't do a CEQA analysis. So the staff dropped it, and we didn't come forward.
Still feel the same way? All right.
Well, I just don't think it'll go away without us at least hearing what everybody has to say on it. It's
not going to go anyway. It's not going to go away anyway. But okay, we're good. Okay, so we will bring back the item on backyard chickens. Yes, we will, and we will bring it back before the summer recess.
I can do that. Actually, the staff report's pretty much done. It's going to be the same report from 2020 or 21, whatever it was, and staff will come back, and based on the input that we have from the police department and code enforcement and animal services.
Exactly. Oh, I wish there was video on this online. Oh my gosh.
Staff will be recommending to not allow backyard chickens, but we'll bring it back for your consideration, and you can run with it.
Can I ask a question on the Bakersfield lawsuit? Has there been resolution to that, or what is the status of it?
No, there's been no change to it. Just the city of Bakersfield, once they were sued because they didn't do the CEQA, they punted and just decided not to pursue it at all, and it has not been changed.
Okay, so that doesn't actually help to inform our discussion about it because there was no actual legal.
And the only other thing I was going to point out was going to be in the handout that you received last week. There were one or two ordinances that the residents were recommending that we could use as a template to develop our ordinance. They were county ordinances, and these counties, the county of Fresno allows chickens. It's not normally done in cities, so we'll bring it back.
Okay, so the answer is, I'm going to now rescind what I said. The mayor should be able to have total authority over the agenda items only when they don't agree with me. What do you think? I think I missed my opportunity. All right, so we will bring that back at some point between now and June. Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Anything else, John?
No.
Okay, council comments. Diane, we'll go that way, this way. Sure.
I actually don't have anything this time.
All right, thank you.
But welcome back.
Thank you. Drew?
I attended an air board meeting last Thursday. One of the items that was interesting was there's a $26 million demonstration for all electric tractor trailers, and Pepsi's going to be kind of spearheading it, and there's an educational component through Duncan Polytech and Reedley College. I've already reached out to Dr. Farrell O'Brien, what is that? Okay, O'Brien, yeah. And I'm going to look at this a little closer because there might be an education component that maybe we could get our city employees, public works people involved, because there's part of that is the repair to these vehicles. So maybe we can get some low-cost education, and that'll be regional too. Same day, I just pulled my computer out and logged on in Cal City's Public Safety Committee, nothing to report out. Matt and I and Lori met with Anthem for an informal conversation, and I thought it was a good conversation, nice folks. We talked about the issues between, kind of a 10,000-foot view between community hospitals and Anthem, and I brought up the scenario of my concern is you're going to have people who experience their first chest pains and think, well, I don't want to have to go and do this, so I'll just stay home and take some antacid, and they die. And today, I have a GERD, acid reflux, and my ENT wants me to go get a esophagogram where they stick, and Fresno Heart was going to be the place to go, and I can't go there. So I need to find out, and I did, I guess the word is, I circled back and said, remember what I told you about this? It happened to me. So I know there's something I can do about ongoing treatment or something, and I'm going to mess with that. But this isn't going away, and I think it's going to get worse, and I don't want it to get worse for our employees. I also decorated Festus last Thursday, and I thought it looked pretty cool. But when I went on Sunday, everybody had taken stuff off him except for his kilt. So, but I think it was well received, hopefully. I don't know. I guess maybe they wanted to know if Festus was wearing pants underneath, and he was. So anyway, that's all I have.
Thank you for doing that. Matt? I can take whatever I want.
So, go Chickens?
What?
I just want to get you.
Go Chickens?
Just wanted to get you going again.
What did I give Councilmember Whalen on his retirement from the Clovis City Council? Chicken socks. Chicken socks. Yeah, but go ahead.
Just to elaborate on what Drew had said, the meeting with them, we also brought up the fact that we had employees that, were being turned away that were seeking oncology care as well. And I know that I had, met with Lori on that and followed up with her. So it is pretty significant issues that are out there that our employees are facing. So hopefully the persons we spoke to will take care of that issue. But it is kind of scary that, you can't go see an oncologist because, of a negotiations crisis between people. So the water board, I was supposed to have a meeting March 23rd, was canceled again. So a couple months in a row, they haven't had any meetings.
Gosh, it starts to rain and people cancel their meetings. I don't know. They don't know what to do.
I know Scott's pretty happy.
Man, it's the water district. Waterboarding is a whole different kind of.
Yeah, be careful.
I didn't say waterboarding. Water board was canceled. So, and I think that's all I got.
Thank you. Paul?
Attended the Housing Community Economic Development Committee, Policy Committee meeting on Thursday, March 16th. And the one action item was just a stalemate. We had like 5 motions and none of it had a majority. And it's with Senator Wiener's SB 4, and that new law will allow by right affordable housing multifamily on higher education institutions and religious institutions. In other words, a church or a school can build affordable housing by right. And so that was one in which we wanted to take action on. The other 2 led to discussion, but no action, just information, are just the housing bond acts that are coming. One is the AB 1657, the Affordable Housing Bond Act, and the other one is SB 834, the California Family Home Construction and Home Ownership Bond Act. So in other words, sort of the state is now looking at sort of what we were been questioning, how do we fund all these mandates, and now they're starting to push some of those through. And then RENA was on there, but we ran out of time, so we never got to talk about this sixth cycle. So that's what I have to report.
Thank you. And then I'll just report that last week I did have the privilege to facilitate the interviews for the Clovis Unified Superintendent, and it was a privilege, and I think people were very appreciative because I said the only reason I'm there is because of our partnership with the district and how important that is to the city. So that was a great experience. So, all right, with that, and I will say this week we have our first, not first, but a joint subcommittee with the school district that since I've been the mayor, and so looking forward to getting back on track with that too. All right, that concludes all of that, and so now we're going to adjourn, and I am going to stand up. Into closed session, we have two items.
One quick question. One quick thing.
No.
They announced their superintendent tonight. So they announced that it is Corrine Fulmer, the new superintendent of Clovis Unified. Internal? Yes.
They were all internal candidates, yeah. Wow. Awesome. That's great. So that's a scoop. That's a scoop. I thought if you were going to talk about chickens again, the answer is no. No chickens. All right. We will now adjourn into closed session. There are two items. Scott, any action that we'll report out?
Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, we're not requesting action on either item, correct? In closed session?
Closed session.
Including the first item? No actions being requested? There is action on the first item, so we will be reporting out.
All right.
Potentially on item number 9, yes.
All right, that. All right.